Okay. Have a gavel. We'll see how it works. My mayor's here.
Yep.
Mayor Ortega, welcome.
Thank you.
Looking a little lonely over there.
He's used to holding down the fort in the hinterlands. Call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We will begin with introductions. To my left.
Mark Snyder, Mayor, Manitou Springs.
Rob McDonald, PPACG.
Darrell Glenn, El Paso County Commissioner.
Raphael Dominguez, Mayor. There you go.
Keith McCafferty, Mayor, Town of Raymond.
Tom Rona, CDOT Region 2 Director.
Jim Law, Public Transportation Representative.
Colonel Rich Birchfield, representing Peterson Air Force Base and Shreveport today. We got a lot of folks on the road right now.
Double the power there.
That's right. Colonel Richard Fogg, Vice Wing Commander at the United States Air Force Academy.
Gabriel Ortega, Mayor, City Fountain.
Norm Steen, Teller County Commissioner.
Andy Pico, Colorado Springs City Council.
Dennis Heisey, El Paso County Commissioner. Going back to Guy.
Guy Dutra Silvera, Area Agency on Aging.
Rich Muzzy, PPACG Environmental Program.
Jason Wilkinson, Policy and Communications. Craig Casper, Transportation Director.
Bob, are you next?
Yep.
Dave?
Munger here with the Citizens Stormwater Task Force.
Walter Ernst, a transportation professional.
Kathleen Krager, City of Colorado Springs.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Bill Gamble, Regional Advisory Council.
Jeff Bond, Peterson Air Force Base.
Thank you, and we've been joined by Trustee Stevens. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you, sir. Agenda approval. Any changes to the agenda? Yes, sir.
Well, I'd like to pull off the, from consent, item 4B.
Okay. Any other changes? Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And we have just been joined by Councilmember Joel Miller. Item number 3 would be public comment. We have a tenured member. Rob, would you like to handle this one?
Sure, and you have the hardware in front of you, so we'll get to that in a minute. Today we'd like to recognize Craig Casper for 10 years of service to the Council of Governments. Looking back over 10 years, he's done a lot of plans. I think 2030 was the first one, and we had 2035 the first go-around, and 2035 the second go-around, and now we're in the midst of doing the 2040 plan. I think Craig's done a great job of shepherding those plans through all the committees, the boards, the public process. I think one of the plans he went to every available event in Farmers Market. I think that was 2035, the first go-around, where folks at Farmers Market are going, really? Transportation plan? That seems a little strange, but we'd like to hear your comments. And I think we got mostly trail comments. I think those seem to be the large number of them. Craig also gets recognized a lot. He's on TRB, or Transportation Research Board committees, national committees that meet occasionally. So he goes out and chats with his peers. I think the other large recognition that we got was 2008. The PPACG, our MPO, was recognized as second best in the country. We lost out to that dreaded city on the east, Pittsburgh. But we'll take the second best planning organization in the country any year. But Craig's done a great job, so 10 years went really fast. So I'd like to thank Craig for his service to PPACG.
Well, Craig, I didn't realize you were a newbie when I first got here. Yeah. You fooled us all, so you apparently came in with some pretty good credentials, and we certainly appreciate your dedication and your time here. Other comments? Norm Steen.
I've had the good fortune. I've been on the board now a little over a year, and had the good fortune to work with Craig and a lot of detailed information. I tell you, if you don't know, there's a lot. Wading through the technical data on transportation is a huge task. And Craig, just a personal note, it's been a great pleasure to work with you and get me up to speed quickly and work through transportation issues. So, always the ability to wade through massive amount of data, find the salient points, communicate policy, and it's been a great help and great to work with you last year. Thank you so much.
Craig, we're going to take a picture here momentarily. Would you like a shot at the mic before?
Before he's at the mic the rest of the day?
Just briefly. No, when Rob said it was 10 years, I couldn't believe it. Time flies when you're busy. So we've done a lot, but we've got a lot more to do yet. Well, thank you very much.
Isn't it time flies when you're having fun?
Well, it's not always fun. Yeah. So, but thank you.
Well, with that, Rob, shall we?
You got the hardware.
Do.
Thank you very much.
Recognizing another hardworking member that is not on PPACG staff, but very much integral to everything we do in this region. Mr. Rona has made it known that he will be retiring sometime soon here.
Yes, sir. Last day of the month.
And 30 years and still in the bottom half of his 50s, I suspect that retirement will look a little different for him than what some of us may view as retirement. But I have a resolution here that I would like approved, and it's kind of not on the agenda, but it's probably not going to affect our tip or our stip, so I'm not too worried about getting everybody to agree to it. Resolution by the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Board of Directors acknowledging appreciation to CDOT Regional Transportation Director Tom Rona. Whereas CDOT is an essential planning partner of the PPACG, and whereas CDOT has representatives serving on various committees of the PPACG, and whereas Mr. Tom Rona has served the citizens of Colorado, CDOT Region 2, and the Pikes Peak region for 30 years, and whereas Mr. Tom Rona has been a leader in delivering critical transportation projects in the Pikes Peak region, including projects on the I-25, Powers Boulevard, US 24, State Highway 67, and State Highway 85-87 corridors. And whereas the June 11, 2014 PPACG board meeting is his final meeting as Regional Transportation Director for the Colorado Department of Transportation. Now, be it therefore resolved that the PPACG Board of Directors wishes to acknowledge their deepest gratitude to CDOT Regional Transportation Director Tom Rona for his commitment to the regional collaboration and for his dedication to the completion of the PPACG Transportation Program projects. Resolved, approved, and adopted by the Board of Directors of the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments this 11th day of June 2014 at Colorado Springs, Colorado. Dennis Heisey, Chair. Attested to by Norm Steen, Secretary. I so move.
Second.
Comments? Tom, do you want to? You could save it for a rebuttal if you.
No, I'd just like to thank you, Chairman Heisey, and the board. It's been a very positive experience working with all of you over the last 2+ nearly 3 years, and I'm very happy that I've been able to deliver some key projects to this area that have improved the transportation system, not only in the Pikes Peak area, but all of Region 2 and the state of Colorado. So hopefully it sounds like you feel the same way, that I did some good here, and I appreciate that very much.
I did find it strange that you took all the beatings for finding the funding for these several projects that'll be going on, and you're going to leave before they even get started. So I'm wondering if I
I'll
should...
get to enjoy them with you as well. So
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Snyder.
I just wanted to thank you, Tom, for being a great advocate for Region 2. I know it's the waters run pretty deep up there in Denver sometimes, but I think you've done a great job of really trying to represent our interests, and that's not always easy, so thank you for that.
thank you, Mayor.
That'll call the roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And Tom, if we could do the same photo op?
All right. We have you surrounded.
Get in between you.
Now, for public comment for items not on the agenda, anyone in the audience wish to bring an item before this board that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none, move to our consent items.
Mr. Chair.
We have,
Mr. Chair.
yes, sir.
I'm not sure what the appropriate time to bring this up is, but at the last month's meeting, there was a motion that was approved about several funding options for Fillmore. And the first was $1 million of PPRTA funding from maintenance budget. If not that, then the Metro funds. And the way the PPRTA vote went is they didn't approve maintenance funds. They approved a different category of funds, and I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate to clean up that motion to make it consistent with the PPRTA board vote. I don't know, because
me
the
look to
motion
Rob
as
here.
it was last week was option A, which was voted on, was to use PPRTA funding. Then if not A, then Metro funding. And the way PPRTA did it was to use capital
Sure.
projects. So
Sure. Yeah, in the world of our transportation improvement program for our new mayors, the TIP, it's doesn't matter if it's PPRTA, maintenance, capital, whatever. It comes into our TIP as local funds, so it doesn't need that descriptor of being maintenance money or capital. It just shows up as other funds and matches all the other categories. So the board's motion doesn't need to be that level of detail.
okay, I just was checking because it wasn't
Yeah, we-
consistent right now.
Good question, but we checked, and we have a lot of flavors of money in that tip for local matches, but we don't get to if it came from Park and Rec of Colorado Springs or Road and Bridge from the county, we don't specify that detail. It just shows up as local.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve items A and C, 4A and C?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve items 4A and C.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4B, member appointments. And Mr. Pico, you had requested we pull this one up.
I'd like to add the name of Fran Pitaro as the Colorado Springs representative that was voted on and approved yesterday afternoon by the City Council.
Do we have a motion for approval
I-
with that addition?
I move that be for approval with that addition.
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone in the audience? Very good. Call the roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 would be our reports. We will begin with the Executive Director's report. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think a lot of things are, again, on your agenda, but let me just highlight a couple of things that are in your packet. I think the first one is, Yeah, I think the workshops are something that some of you join in, and our two new mayors invite you to the Friday before this meeting. We have a workshop to get into some of the detail on some of the topics on the agenda. This agenda, we talked about last Friday two things, the transportation plan and the funding pieces of that. Which usually takes a more lengthy discussion that we have at the board meeting. We also talked about the Area Agency on Aging funding, another topic we can get into all sorts of detail at the workshop compared to at this setting. And so I invite all of you to look for those emails and see what topics we'll have. The next one is not going to be on July 4th. It'll probably be on the 7th or 8th. Before your next board meeting here. So look for that agenda to come out. Again, I invite you to join us for those in-depth conversations. And for the two mayors, I'll get on your calendars hopefully soon to give you what we call the PPACG 101 to see what you've gotten yourself into as part of this board. Next thing I want to talk about, CDOT is holding around the state with the other MPOs a phone conversation, a task force of sorts with the TIP and the state version, the STIP, trying to figure out what that document looks like, how we can present it to our various boards across the state, make it understandable to the public, to the professionals that work with it. We have two more TIP amendments. We do those every month. CDOT's talking about maybe doing a STIP amendment once or twice a year, which may correspond to us doing a once or twice a year. So to do that, we need to go through the details. Federal law prescribes how you do the TIPs and the STIPs, so we want to make sure we're coinciding with their requirements. So Federal Highways is on the phone call, Federal Transit is on the phone call, CDOT, and as I said, the MPOs. We've had two calls. Craig and I have been on those calls. Any movement on that we'll bring back to this board. As you might remember, you have a memorandum of agreement, an MOA with CDOT, of the 12 ways you can do TIP amendments, either administratively or through a public process. So we have that agreement. It's 4 years old. It may be time to bring that back for you all to look at it, our committees to look at it, and sign a new agreement probably by year's end. So that's an ongoing in the transportation world. The other topics will be on your agenda. So I'll leave my report at that. Any questions?
Questions for Rob? Thank you. Transportation Advisory Committee, Tom Casawara.
Good morning. Just about everything that was on our agenda last month is on your agenda today. TIP Amendment 18, which is adding $40,000 of federal funds to local share for downtown transfer station relocation study. TIP Amendment 19, which is the I-25 Cimarron Interchange Reconstruction Project. And there was a contingent approval recommendation acknowledging that the county needs to provide a letter to PPACG requesting STP Metro funds to be returned that aren't being implemented. Then a lot of discussion items. There was a scenario planning workshop that Craig Casper held, safety plan, funding forecast and financial plan, congestion management plan, and the regional non-motorized transportation system plan update given by Brian Vituli. That was pretty much it. We have a meeting next week, and next month hopefully I'll report on some more exciting stuff than this. This was kind of a run-of-the-mill meeting.
That's not all bad.
No, it isn't.
Questions for Tom? Thank you. And while Bob Baker is coming up for our Community Advisory Committee, we have been joined by Council Member Noel Sawyer from Woodland Park. So
Thank you.
glad you're here.
Ran a couple extra miles this morning, so.
Well, that's what I was going to think. Was it all downhill?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm sure that the CAC would join in the congratulations that Craig received. He's done a great job for us on the CAC. It did smack of a prepay raise recognition, but I imagine sometimes those things are in lieu thereof, though, aren't they? We gave recognition also to 3 term-limited CAC members, Jim Godfrey, an immediate past chair, Larry Bagley, chair of our nominating committee, and he's had a very busy year. We've filled the positions with some very capable individuals during the year. And then Tom Moll. All 3 were well-informed. They were good critical thinkers and moved the CAC's work forward. Thank you for the Town of Rama appointment being filled with Scott Turner. We look forward to our relationship with him. We also thanked Brian Vituli, Senior Transportation Planner, for his work at PPACG, as well as his constantly informative reporting on relevant issues at the CAC. We wish him well in his new responsibilities with the City of Colorado Springs. Mirroring what Tom said, we approved TIP Amendment number 18 relating to the downtown transfer station relocation study. We also mirrored what the TAC did as far as approval of TIP Amendment number 19 relating to I-25 Cimarron interchange reconstruction with the contingent approval for the same reason. And we received briefings on the 2040 RTP safety plan, congestion management process, funding forecast, and the scenario planning workshop. I attended that, and I was on the accelerated trend, and having lived here for a long time, I was amazed at the change that we thought Banning Lewis was going to cause versus what really in reality has happened. But then the growth south of the Banning Lewis Ranch is really popping. So that was one of the things that was kind of an eye-opener as we looked at that. That's it, unless there are questions.
Questions for Bob?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to our Regional Advisory Council, Bill Gramble.
Good morning. At the last meeting, we discussed our allocations for the coming year, 2014-15, and in your packet, I believe on about page 29, you'll find a couple of sheets, but also was given to you this morning 2 updated sheets. The question was to show you how the money was allocated, which is this sheet here. Shows you all the providers and the monies that they were allocated based on their request. The second sheet shows you the different categories where the money comes from. So we were asked to provide that. The Technical Review Committee did meet in consultation with the AAA staff. These are the allocations that were given, and we'll be asking you for approval of these allocations for the coming year. If you have questions about what area the money's come from, that's on this sheet. It shows you where the funding comes from in the various categories.
Any questions for Mr. Gamble? Thank you, sir.
Just have one other couple of things. We'll be meeting in next month, July. We'll be meeting in Fairplay. We conduct our meetings in the other counties other than El Paso, so next month we'll be meeting in Park County, and next month, following that, Teller County, so that we can attract all the seniors in those areas as well. And one more thing, the law changes on July 1st for mandatory reporting for elders over 70. Previously, requirement was to report back to adult services. Now the law changes that if you're aware of a witness or suspicion that an elder over 70 is being abused, you must report that to the police. Previously, it was reported to the adult care, but over 70, you suspect abuse or know of it, then you must report that to the police. That's a mandatory change in the law, July 1st.
I think it also changed who mandatory reporters are, did it not?
Yes, the people who are in positions of, who know ability to report that, caregivers or ministers or
I think it
help
included now
agents,
financial professionals.
financial providers.
Right, because one of the key areas is financial abuse.
Yes, we received a presentation last month. One of the biggest areas of concern is sons and daughters ripping off their elder parents financially. So if you're in a position to see that, won't happen to me because I don't have any money for my kids to rip me off. But anyway, it's just a change in the law that says, you must report that to the police, and they in turn will do subsequent reporting. You could also report it to Adult Care Services, you formerly did, but it's mandatory to report that kind of abuse over 70. Doesn't mean you're not concerned about somebody 69, but you got to start somewhere, and that's what the law says.
Councilmember Pico.
Is that a federal or state law?
That's a federal law, I believe.
Federal law.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Does that include my wife's cooking?
Bill may wade into that one, but this board's going to stay out of it.
Oh, gosh. Rodney Dangerfield said his wife told him to take the trash out. He said, you take it out. You cook it.
Thank you. Mobility Coordinating Committee report. Gail Nels, welcome.
Good morning. So maybe I'll follow on with Bill Gamble's discussion. We also discussed the elder abuse. Scott Bartlett joined us last month's meeting, and it was to also include those with disabilities. And we had a discussion about what is the obligation of even people that are transiting, people of that age that might be in those kind of circumstances. And I think we all decided to err on the side of just informing the police if we felt that anyone was being abused in any way. We also had some case studies presented of what a graduate student here in the Springs area was asked to look into other communities and how they worked with the paratransit and human service providers. And she looked at Austin, Texas, Monterey, and Spokane, and basically how they funded their transit. And Monterey was a sales tax kind of way to fund it. Spokane also, and with some volunteers, and they're looking at funding from federal, private, and some partnerships. So that was kind of edifying for all of us. We also had a discussion from the Organizing Committee on Transit with Courtney Stone from the Independence Center, and that has gotten some press in the newspaper as of late. But she is collecting signatures to try to get a greater group for advocacy for this constituency. And we also talked about the Veteran Transit Community Living Initiative that now 4 partners are installing or have installed the software that enables us to coordinate better for these kind of human service provider transit, and that is going well. And we're looking for improved coordination amongst ourselves and the 4 agencies, which are Silver Key, Amblacab, Community Intersections, and Fountain Valley. And we're looking for more efficiencies, and so hopefully in the next coming months we'll be able to collect the data and report out on that to you all as well. And that's about it for the month. Any questions?
Questions for Ms. Nels?
Thank you.
Thanks. Arkansas Fountain Coalition for Urban River Evaluation. Rich Muzzy.
The acronym still isn't getting any shorter. After met last week on Monday, there were representatives from each of the 11 districts there at the meeting. We spent a fair amount of time going over the contract with the Colorado Data Sharing Network. This is the group that will be uploading the data for the Regulation 85, the nutrient monitoring requirements that the state has in place. This will be the second contract. We went through some of the issues that we had and concerns from the last contract and got those addressed in this next contract. Also talked about the next steps, and the consultant that we hired, Brown and Caldwell, will be preparing detailed maps recommending the sampling locations for each of those issue areas that I went ahead and presented to the board in the water quality white paper that was developed by AFCURE a couple months ago. So we'll be taking a look at the proposed monitoring locations, the parameters, the frequency in a couple of months, and fine-tuning that. We also had a couple of fun items, such as the AFCURE logo. We finally decided on a logo. And I'll actually go ahead and include that in the packet for next month. And we bought the domain rights for a website, www.afcure.org, and we'll be starting to transfer the information from the PPACG website eventually to the AFCURE website. With that,
Pretty hot bidding for that website.
What's that?
There's some pretty hot bidding for that.
No, but I guess AFCURE.com was taken by it's the rights are owned by some doctors organization.
Okay.
So.
Cure. Imagine that.
Air Force Cure.
Sounds like a recovery group. Questions for Rich?
Thank you.
Thank you. Pikes Peak Stormwater Update. Dave Munger.
Thank you. I'm Dave Munger. I'm here in my capacity as the co-chair of the Pikes Peak Citizens Stormwater Task Force. And I do offer also my congratulations to Craig, with whom I've worked a fair amount of time on some transportation reporting. He's a very class guy and a very good example of an excellent public servant, I think. Thank you all for having me here. Some of you will have seen this in your capacities as commissioners or members of the Council of, once or twice, of the Council of Colorado Springs, and the mayor, a few mayors I've talked to as well around the area. We'll be talking more, I'm sure. And let's see, what do I press next? This one here? Okay.
Too many remotes. So if you just want to stay or keys.
Okay, thank you. This one? There we go. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about. Thank you very much. Hi, how are you? So we're talking about the Fountain Creek watershed within the county of El Paso. The Fountain Creek watershed actually extends a little bit north into, or starts a little bit north in Douglas County, and is also part of Teller County, and goes down into Pueblo. But we are talking, when we're talking about the Pikes Peak Citizens Stormwater Task Force, we're talking about the portion of the Fountain Creek watershed that is within the county. And one of the reasons we're talking about that at all is because we have some significant problems. And this is reflected in the report card that the American Society for Civil Engineers gave us back in 2012. We got a D- on that report card for our stormwater infrastructure. And I'll point out that we got a D- in public safety within that. Both are extremely concerning to us, and it's why people were motivated, particularly the county commissioners and the city council of Colorado Springs, to establish a stormwater task force, which was formed about 2 years ago, and consists of business folks, ordinary citizens, and engineers. Its purpose was to develop, as you can see here, a solution to the stormwater situation. And in doing so, we think we followed a very methodical approach. We've had lots of help in doing this, lots of public meetings. We've had a lot of good engineers take a look at this. We've also had some economists and some lawyers take a look at what we're doing to be sure that we understand the economic impacts, both for and against, positive and negative, and also to be sure that we are going to propose something that will actually be allowed to work by the legal system. And we've done a lot of research, and among that research are 2 public opinion polls, which were done, one in November and one in March. Those polls showed, and I'm not exaggerating here, 95% of our population, that's with a plus or minus error factor of 4-point-something%, so it could be as low as 90-something% and as high as 99-something%, that believe, our citizens believe, that stormwater is a significant problem for our region. That's a very unusual number to get for anything. All of you who've run for office know what I'm talking about. Anyone who's done public opinion research knows it's unusual to find that sort of unanimity within any sort of community. And 90% of those folks think that we ought to fund this on a continuous basis. They understand that stormwater isn't going to go away. We can't solve it once in a few years and then expect that to last. 81% also prefer the sort of funding we have for the PPRTA. That is, it needs to be dedicated to solving the stormwater problem. Almost 2/3 of the people we've asked support a fee-based authority as opposed to a sales tax funded authority or a property tax funded authority. And almost over 3/4 would like to see whatever is done be guided by a master plan and a project list. And about the same amount want to see the highest priority projects. I always feel a little self-conscious with this note because, of course, everyone wants to see the highest priority projects done in the least amount of time. And this slide, when we talk to the business community, this slide resonates very well with these folks. This shows you what we are paying because we have waited 25 years to do something about stormwater. Our fellow sister cities, is a better term, on the Front Range, all did something about stormwater 25 years ago. If we'd done that, we'd be spending $30 million, a little over $30 million less per year than we will be spending now to correct that problem. And by extension, the longer we wait to solve this problem, the more it's going to cost us. And here's what CH2, by the way, that analysis comes not just from our 200-some people who have been involved in the Stormwater Task Force, but from the 2 economists at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, Zwerlein and Crowley, who we asked to do a study of that. And we'll have some more information from them in a minute. In the meantime, we've also had CH2M Hill do a study for both the county and for the city, 2 separate studies. Combining the results of those studies, we see that we've got $623+ million worth of capital improvement we need to do to fix our stormwater problem. And we've got almost $14 million a year worth of operations and maintenance to fund to make that happen, to keep what we have and to make sure we preserve what we create in the future. And then Zwerlein and Crowley also took a look at what would happen if we do this, if we pass some sort of provision to improve our stormwater situation. If we take on those projects and do those projects over a 20 to 40-year period of time, which is what it's probably going to take, we'll create 360 new good engineering level jobs a year as a result, and we will improve our gross metropolitan product by $50 million. We'll also give folks who are in various watersheds and various floodplains, we'll give them an opportunity for lower insurance rates. We will do what every other community on the Front Range has done with making sure that part of our community infrastructure is well taken care of. We'll be more attractive to businesses as a result. Right now, we're competing with communities like Denver and Boulder and Fort Collins that can say to new businesses that are interested, yes, we protect your investment by making sure we deal with stormwater effectively. We're the only city of any size on the Front Range that can't, only community, El Paso, the entire El Paso community, only community that can't say that right now. And you'll see some of these other benefits as well. I will give you a handout when I'm done here, so don't feel you've got to make notes. I think you'll have most of these here. I'm happy to answer questions, too, as we go along. So what's our plan for dealing with this? We've identified the problem. We know that a solution, there are certain parameters for a solution that the public's willing to accept. What's the plan? We're suggesting a regional authority composed of elected officials, such as yourselves, from across the watershed. That regional authority would have a Colorado Springs majority. Colorado Springs has approximately 70%, we think. We're not sure. We won't know until the first year of this authority, actually, but we're pretty sure that somewhere around 70% of the impervious surface in the watershed belongs to Colorado Springs. But to make sure that Colorado Springs doesn't pick on all of you, or that any of you can pick on Colorado Springs, we've suggested a supermajority for budget votes, for the approval of master plan changes, for emergency and the designations and designation of regional projects. And as it stands right now, and this is all subject to some negotiation yet, we would see that supermajority as being composed of a majority of the representatives from Colorado Springs, one of the two commissioners, at least one of the two commissioners from El Paso County, and at least one of the representatives from one of the other communities in the authority. So no one can decide to do something without a majority of Colorado Springs, and Colorado Springs can't decide to do something without the approval of at least a significant portion of El Paso County and smaller community representatives. So that IGA, which we are working on now, deals with that, would form the authority and would guide its operations, and would also provide the basis for the ballot language, which we are working on as well. And this next point is a good point because the funds that would be raised would be spent in proportion to how they are raised. And aside from certain built-in costs, such as administration, which we'll talk about in just a minute, those funds would go back in that proportion to the entity from which they were raised. So that fee that we're talking about, and by the way, we know from our research that a fee is much more acceptable to our population, to our voters in particular, than is a sales tax or a property tax. So that fee would be based on the amount of impervious surface. It would be applied to taxable and non-taxable organizations as well, and there would be caps on the amount that any individual organization, such as a government or a commercial property or a nonprofit, would pay on the amount of impervious surface. So Walmart will end up paying less per square foot of impervious surface than I will, for instance, as a individual property owner. And we have that rate study underway right now with CH2M Hill, and we expect to have an initial report from them on June 30th. But one of the things that we have determined, or that is in the IGA, and we think is one of those things that ought to bind us, is we believe that the average single-family residence should not pay more than $10 a month in stormwater fees. And we know from our survey research that that's an acceptable level. Much above that, we start to get resistance from our public, which otherwise understands that we've all got to pitch in to solve this problem. And below that makes it a little harder for us, as you can imagine, to accomplish what needs to be done. That amount would be collected on the county property tax bill. For those of you, such as the Air Force Academy, who don't probably receive a county property tax bill regularly anyway, we would find some other way of dealing with assessing that fee. We have, by the way, had a very good conversation with the civil engineering folks from your establishments, and think we're on the right track. We're going to end up revising our IGA language to make sure we accommodate the military's way of doing that sort of business. We will also make sure those funds are dedicated to 5 particular categories: administration, emergencies, planning, operations and maintenance, and capital, and we'll put a cap on the amount that could be spent on administration. And we also want to encourage the folks who are the various governments who are currently doing stormwater work to be able to continue to promote or to support that work. And then more of the plan is that we've talked about this already. The Fountain Creek watershed within El Paso County would be included, plus Falcon, which has significant issues with stormwater. We will have definitely a project list. Right now, we have about 200 projects on that list. We're doing some more work with CH2M Hill to make sure that we include all of the smaller communities that were included in those first two studies, and also know what the implications are for the recent fires and floods, particularly Black Forest and Waldo Canyon. And then we will have a master plan. We'll have actually a provision for a master planning process in the ballot language, so that when this ballot is passed in November, this issue is passed in November, the public will understand what the participating governments have committed themselves to do with regard to master planning, and also how they will define emergencies. And then we will have the administrative costs capped at 1%. And anyone who has dealt with this knows that's going to be a very small amount of money to deal with. But what we are anticipating is just a very small staff that will then contract out all of the work that needs to be done, including the project management portions of that. So all of our commercial providers of these sorts of services, especially locally, will benefit economically from doing this work too. We won't be growing government, at least not very much. We will have a not that well-paid administrator and a small, very small staff, probably 2 or 3 people, who will be involved in monitoring what's going on, helping smaller entities that don't have their own stormwater staffs come up with appropriate providers, making sure that the money is spent in the way that it's been promised to be spent according to the ballot language, et cetera. And then, sure.
What's the projected revenue from the fees?
48 to 52 million a year. And at that rate, with almost $700 million worth of projects, and that might grow a little bit with inflation, et cetera, with operations and maintenance costs that will grow as we increase the capital. We think will be a 30 to 40-year project. And then we'll have to figure out we will, if the ballot measure passes as we anticipate, we will have an existing ongoing fund to provide for operations and maintenance. So this is what we are anticipating, or proposing rather, for the structure of this board. And the voters would select, as I said, all the people sitting around here, with the exception of the folks in uniform, I guess, and Mr. Knoll, maybe a few others, who've been elected would be eligible. And I guess we're not talking about Green Mountain, not talking about the City of Woodland Park or Rama, but the rest of you who've been elected would be eligible to serve on this board. Not Teller, exactly, not Teller. Yeah. I thought it was more of a majority than that, but the more I look, it's less, so I'm sorry. But that board would appoint a technical committee and a citizens advisory committee. It would also appoint and supervise the administrator of this. That administrator would be charged with what we've talked about, the billing of the administration, and only able to spend 1% of what's raised on administration, on doing planning studies and on contracting for services. The funding would be spent, as we've already talked about, in this way. And what that little arrow that comes up and around on the bottom and the right of this slide is intended to do is to illustrate that there are alternative ways of doing this. We just picked cities at random, actually. It could be that Manitou decides that it's got enough, Manitou Springs, it decides that it has enough staff to manage its own stormwater projects, in which case this authority would provide Manitou Springs with the money that's been raised and the proportion that's been raised to do the projects that are mandated on the ballot, or the projects that come out of the master planning process, or the projects that come out of some sort of emergency. And Manitou would say, thanks for the money, and we'll follow the rules. On the other hand, Green Mountain Falls might say, we'd just as soon not grow our little government any bigger than it is. Would you please handle this stuff for us? And the authority then, the administration of the authority would find those people, look for those folks who would do that under a contract basis, manage that process for you, make sure that that is done according to the ballot language and to your satisfaction. So that's what we see this as having a couple, we call this a hybrid model because it's a little bit like the SEMSWA model in southeast Denver area, and a little bit like PPRTA. And we were actually, when we talked to a number of elected officials, they said, would you give us a hybrid, because we think that both of those things might be useful. So that's what we've tried to do here. So our next steps are to continue to negotiate the intergovernmental agreement. We are right now working on developing or planning a meeting that would take place the 26th of this month or the 30th of this month that would bring all of the elected officials together to if not finalize, come very close to finalizing the IGA language. And then we will work. We are now working on ballot language, but we have a lot of placeholders in that ballot language until the IGA is finished. We would have the project list done no later than the 31st. We're hoping it'll be done a little bit earlier than that. We'll continue to do lots of public input meetings, mostly in July. We'll continue to meet with businesses. We now have, by the way, the endorsement of the Regional Business Alliance for what we are doing for this project, and we have the endorsement of the Pikes Peak Association of Realtors. We also have the endorsement of the political branch of the HBA, and that body is waiting to see the ballot language before they give us their final approval. What I'm trying to say is we think we've got a fair amount of community support for this. It's certainly in keeping with the parameters that the public has told us they want to see, and we think that, including the one of let us have a vote on this. So we intend to have this on the ballot in November. And I will just emphasize that we are looking forward to having some good conversations with all of the elected folks that would be involved in this. And right now we're working hard on, we've talked already with a few mayors, including the mayor to my right, and we're hoping to have some more conversations. We're looking forward to meeting with, I know you guys have gotten more to do than you can shake a stick at this point, but we'd be delighted to have a conversation with you guys. And we've had some good conversations with Fountain and with Manitou Springs, and we're looking forward to doing more of that as well. So, any questions or comments or suggestions or protests?
I can't. I sit here. I know you don't believe it. I sit here quiet most of the time.
I know you too well to believe that.
Yeah. I would just say that this is excellent. I had the good fortune in the early 1970s, I know you all don't think I'm that old, to go to EPA for a year. And I walked in, Rolling Gal was the head of this agency. He says, "Hi, Jim." He said, "I thought you were in D.C. Weren't you at EPA?" I said, "I still am." I said, "We're about to put you on probation to lose your status for your water quality standards." And he thought I was kidding. But I was serious because of the water quality problems. It was unacceptable to EPA. Then it was that way. The Corps of Engineers got involved. That's when I learned even a small trickle stream can come under the federal authority. We have been trying to solve this problem as a community for a very long time. And that's when somebody first started taking note of Fountain Creek and the problems resulting from how we were handling water quality. I know we even had a fee system for a while, as you might recall, and we got rid of it. It was probably too effective, I'm not sure. People just didn't want to pay it. And I know it's not an easy subject. But the price has gotten so high now, it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
I hope the community will get behind this in full force to get this plan going and get its support. It's time this community did it. It is an embarrassment that every year people start looking up the hill from Manitou Springs with the fear of everybody losing everything they have again. And if nothing else, people in this, I'm sorry I'm making a speech, but if anything else, if not anything else, people ought to have some sympathy for the people who've been most directly involved, let alone worry about their own flooding. And we just need, this organization, our representatives need to get behind this and get this thing done. I mean, it's an embarrassment, and it's certainly a sad situation. So I hope each and every elected official on this board will go back to their boards and get behind finally getting a plan and getting something done about the water that we send down to our southern neighbors. End of speech.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. You sound a bit like, if you don't mind my offering this comparison, a bit like John Wesley Powell, who said very much the same thing back in the early 1800s. So we have to deal with these problems he was maintaining. We have to deal with these problems as watersheds. They cross political boundaries. They don't know those sorts of boundaries. We need to organize ourselves to do that. And I will point out that no matter where you live in the county, whether you're in the watershed or not, actually, when it floods someplace, you can't get to where you were planning on going. You can't get to work, or that business closes, or whatever. It's a big problem. Thanks very much.
Mayor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dave. It was a good presentation. You have 5 funding categories, or 5 spending categories.
Right.
So is this going to be you're going to ask the vote to create the authority and for the authority's ability to levy a fee?
Right.
And is there a sunset provision?
Yes, thank you very much. Didn't put that in there. It's very important, and it's important to the voters. We know that a sunset, over 70% of the voting population says a sunset's important to this. We are proposing that we sunset, as we do with the PPRTA, we sunset the capital portion, and that would sunset, we've tested this, that would sunset in our proposal after 20 years. 10 to 20 years doesn't make a difference to the public. And being a fairly thorough guy, I wanted to know what they thought about 30 years, and 30 years looks a little too far out. So
20 is a little bit of a reach, too. 10 seems to be the number, but I think for something like this with such great need, I think 20 would get fair consideration.
And it allows us to bond more easily.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
And then so some portion of the fee would remain for maintenance.
Yes, about 35% of what is originally raised would remain for operations and maintenance, and another 10% for emergencies, administration, and planning.
And that emergency would be kind of a fund, a rainy day fund, literally, that would be available to entities that have emergency needs.
Exactly.
And that type of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a lot of the operating rules would be established in that first year of operation by the board. We're trying in the intergovernmental agreement and in the ballot language, trying not to bind the board's hands more than we need to assure the public that the money is going to be spent the right way, so that you will be able to have some flexibility to respond to emergencies.
And then, the devil's always in the details. So
Yes, sir.
we're talking about El Paso County property tax bill with a fee component on
Right.
there. And what happens if, will there be an appeal process for people who feel they've been wrongly charged with too much impermeable surface? Or what have
Absolutely.
you?
Yes. If I get a bill for 40,000 square feet of impervious surface, I'm going to be knocking on your board door saying, something's wrong here, fix this.
Yeah, and I would think that process should occur prior to the actual
Exactly.
submission to the county for, the fee collection. And then, this is a tough one that we run across, but what happens if somebody refuses to pay their stormwater fee component of their property?
I just talked to the Sertoma Club this morning about that. They were very concerned that, well, didn't that happen with the cities? And of course it did. We had a lack of unanimity, I would think it might be the easiest way to say this, when the city established its stormwater enterprise. We will not have a lack of unanimity, or a lack of consensus anyway when this is done. All of you will be involved in making this decision. All the parties and party elected officials will have a role to play in that. We think that that's going to result in no arguing about whether this fee can be assessed on the county tax bill. We've already had that conversation with the current county officials. It will be it'll be watershed-wide within the county. We think that that's covered.
Okay, so I guess my specific question then is, so if somebody says, I'm not paying this fee, I'll pay the rest of my taxes, then the county would go through the normal process for somebody who hasn't paid their tax bill?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, I have to say, I'm saying exactly from my point of view, there are still some details that would have to be worked out in that first year of operation, but I'm assuming that that would be in everybody's best interest to make sure that there are no scofflaws and no way for people who don't want to pay what the citizens have determined is reasonable not to be made accountable to their obligation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Sir, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you so very much for the cooperation you have had with the United States Air Force Academy on our stormwater abatement issues and our hydrology studies. Really appreciate it. It's been a great collaboration, so thank you. But then I'd like to know what is the impact to the commercial entities? And I'm referring to trying to not have a repeat of the Bass Pro Shop incident where they meet code per se,
right,
but yet the implications are great and severe. And so as we look at further expansion northward on the I-25 corridor along the Academy border, what provisions are we going to have to preclude a recurrence of the Bass Pro Shop incident?
The actual mitigation efforts and prevention efforts will be determined by this board as it moves along with the advice of technical experts. And I'm assuming there will be, given the size of the military presence in this community, I'm assuming that there will be military representatives on both those committees probably. But one of the things that we want to make sure, and we'll have some language in the ballot, is that to this effect, that whatever we do is consistent with the preservation of our natural resources and our environment. So we don't anticipate, all the folks who've been involved in this do not anticipate creating a bunch of concrete channels that will direct flow. They anticipate promoting good practices that will minimize what you're going through right now, and certainly correct what's happening right now. So that's being pretty vague, pretty general, but I think the specifics are going to have to be determined by the technical experts and then approved by the board.
Okay. Thank you.
But you certainly have a big problem, and one of the reasons from the Bass Pro Shops, for instance, and one of the reasons that we are trying to do this is to keep those problems from recurring and correct the problems that are already there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilmember Miller.
Dave, you're like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep going on this. Really appreciate all the work that you've done at this.
Thank you.
And the tiny, non-existent salary you're receiving for it.
We share something in common, Councilman.
There you go. But I just have a few questions, and more of them keep coming up every time I see this. And one is, to clarify, will this be part of the tax bill, the county tax bill? Because previously with the stormwater enterprise, it was a separate bill.
Right.
Is it going to be included on the tax bill because it's not part of the mill levy?
It will be included on the tax bill. At least that's the thinking right now. It will be. That seems to be the best way not to have to create a separate structure. We'll have to do some new things to build the Air Force Academy, for instance, but most people will be covered. Most people are covered by the county property tax bill. So it will be on that piece of paper or in that envelope, but it will be a separate fee. It won't be part of a tax.
And with that, the concern is that it's not a tax write-off.
Sure.
Yeah, it's on your property tax bill. There's going to be some confusion about how that works.
Yes.
So I'm sure that somebody's looking at that.
We are looking hard at that. We would love to have it be tax deductible, but the overlying rationale for a fee is what I said before. It spreads the cost out over a larger group of payers, including those folks who wouldn't be covered by a tax bill.
So understanding that, I think it is going to be a point of confusion that is
Absolutely.
on your tax bill, but it's not a tax, it's a fee. And
There's a lot of public education that's yet to be done on this.
the other question I have, having sat on the Airport Advisory Commission for 9 years, and you talk about the fee for government entities, and there's going to be a cap, and it's going to be a different rate. I know at the airport, at least, there is a tremendous amount of work for stormwater that's part of their capital plan. Detention ponds, Sand Creek remediation efforts, lots of capital investment already to mitigate the huge, obviously huge impervious volume of surface there is at the airport. So is there any consideration for that
Yes.
in assessing those fees?
There actually will be, in addition to the appeals process we talked about, there will be a credit process established. So let's say the airport says, we are going to do the following things to mitigate how we deal with what happens with stormwater. They can go to this authority and say, this is what we have, what we are implementing or what we have implemented. We think we deserve a credit. And there'll be a process for dealing with that.
Great, thanks.
I'm assuming some of those arguments might get a little contentious, but the process will be there.
Well, certainly, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Great questions.
Any other questions here at the board level? And then we'll go back to the audience and see if we have some.
You have one right here.
Okay, thought I saw hands somewhere.
Somewhere.
Trustee Stevens.
Couple questions for you. Thinking about the residential realm and how many hundreds of thousands of households that is, and that appeal process, just a consideration or a thought that may make sense is some sort of tiered approach, such that it is, because 80% of them will probably be within such close variance that it's just a set fee for, most of them, and then you may be able to avoid adjudicating each and every appeal, whether it's square inches of driveway variances. So
That's a great suggestion. There are lots of communities around the country that take exactly that sort of tiered approach. We're not trying to specify, we're not trying to be that specific at this point, because we'd like the board to be able to figure those things out.
I think from experience with the RTA, having the board having some of that purview and discretion is critical. And it sounds like you've learned from that experience as well. Looking further down the road, once this is passed, it makes sense to have the entity probably contracted like RTA with another entity, and three come to mind, either PPACG, RBD, or even the Fountain Creek Watershed District. Any thoughts as to where the alignment might be best? Or, I don't mean to put a political question ahead of you, but it just seems logical. And it may be helpful to the voters as well to say, it makes sense for us to be thinking about aligning with this.
Well, we know that the public thinks the RTA is a success, and demonstrated that pretty convincingly at the last ballot with 80% approving extension. So I would guess that that's probably the way in which we're going. But again, the actual contracting with anyone will be the board's decision, and there are, as you pointed out, at least three alternatives. So I wouldn't want to suggest that that decision's been made, because it hasn't, and it won't be made by my group. That's for sure. The citizens group won't get its. We might make a recommendation, but we won't make that decision. And there may be some other group that surfaces as a result.
One other additional, really just comments on the public education campaign, is the emphasis. I thought the slide that you presented that looks at the price of the deferral very helpful, but I think for the public, really emphasizing what's the price of doing nothing. It's not just delays. It's and finding out what that huge number is. Just envisioning and strategically thinking about major disasters in this area, as well as lawsuits and all sorts of other issues along that lines. If we do nothing, what will this manifest into? Because that, I think, is the contrast. Do we pay $120 a year for residential properties, or do we potentially be in a huge financial catastrophe that impacts us dramatically as a region and impacts our economy and such.
That's a really great observation. I've made that note. We'll include that from now on.
And another small point
Sure.
is maybe to those that are interested and aware, which I suspect is a minority of the population, is distinguishing the differences between these existing structures that I already mentioned with the regional floodplain and the Fountain Creek Watershed District and things, because some people will say, well, don't we already have that? And so be able to prepare.
It's true. And it's certainly the case that both Monument and Manitou Springs already have structures or methods in place for funding. We're pretty sure that this will result in more. I was talking to the mayor just before the meeting. This will result in more available funding than what either of those entities can raise by themselves. And we know that working together, we can have some enormous economies of scale to reduce costs for everybody. You mentioned some really good points. I will say that about public education, I will say that we also know there are two other things that are very important to people, and that is being able to point to the projects, and we will on our website be able to do that. And the other is tell me how much it's going to cost me, and we will be able to do that within certain ranges. Until we've done the entire survey of the county, of the watershed in the county, which will have to take place once the authority's been established, we won't be able to say with absolute precision what your bill is, but we will be able to tell people before they vote what the likely fee will be for their property.
And do you have a sense of the per square foot of impervious surface? What I'm thinking of is as a commercial property, do you have, we can assess and figure out what our paved surface area is and have a sense of that. And if there was a range of square foot dollars, that would be helpful as anticipation.
That's what we've contracted, in part, what we've contracted with CH2M Hill to provide us.
Great.
So we should be able to answer that question.
June 30th.
I hope. No later than July 25th. And no matter what, we will have an answer for people on July 25th, or 26th anyway. So.
Anyone in the audience, I'd like to have you come up to the microphone, please, this recorded meeting, and that way we can get your comments and questions out where everyone can hear them.
Bob Baker. I would go back almost as many years as Jim Knoll. And I am too. I'm glad to still be here, though. I served as chairman of the chamber in 1984. And a fellow by the name of Bob Hall, an engineer, retired military, wrote a report that was excellent to solve the infrastructure and stormwater needs here in our community. And at that time, the total was $350 million. Infrastructure for both, we're talking roads, bridges, and we were talking also stormwater. Advance that now, and I think when you combine all of those things, I've heard figures that are $1 billion, $1.2 billion. And, I thought we had a really good deal going with the stormwater fee that a certain person in our community said was a tax. And I really applaud what you're doing, Dave. It's taking away the negativism. First of all, it will be a voter-approved fee. If I'm hearing things right, it will not be subject to Tabor requirements, and it's dedicated, and it has the sunset. And I don't think the timing for this could be better. I mean, with what we have been through in Waldo Canyon and Manitou Springs and the west side, with what has happened there and the floodplains that now are real floodplains, I think this is just an excellent opportunity to get this very, very much needed proposal through. And I think it's just great, the work you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sue Meals from Ute Pass. I live on Fountain Creek and live in Chipeta Park. I have two questions. One, you gave information about percentages of what the voters would say. How many got that survey? What percentage of voters actually got that survey? I didn't get it.
I understand. Chipeta Park, I believe, is not in the, you're in Teller County, am I right?
Oh, no, sir.
Are you, okay, I'm sorry.
In fact, I represent,
Okay, I apologize. You certainly would have been eligible for the survey. We surveyed 400 people, 403 people in November, 400 people exactly in March. Given that we have about 600,000 people in the county, the chances of your being called were pretty slim, but we know from survey research science that gives us a pretty good indication of what the population thinks. And as I said, the results are accurate to within 4-point-something%, plus or minus.
thank you. The second question, you said there's other groups working on stormwater projects. Do you have a list of which ones those are?
I'm not sure if I said that I may have spoken. Other groups.
There are other community groups who currently,
If I can, I think I'm sorry. She was referring to when you talked about Monument and Manitou having
Yes.
ongoing stormwater
Right.
projects already.
There are at least two communities that I'm aware of that are funding stormwater projects through separate fee structures or taxes, and we are hoping to have conversations with both of those and any others that would keep us from giving any particular group of people a double whammy. So we wouldn't be collecting fees and taxes from Manitou Springs citizens or from Monument.
I do have to express our frustration. As citizens, when we were trying to recover from some of the fires and prepare for the floods, and of course we had to coordinate with about 5 or 6 communities, rural communities for the most part, including Cedar Heights and Crystal Park. But you know what we found was the number of layers of government. We would try to find out, okay, where's the $5 million going? Well, it's split here, 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 and we would go to meetings, and when there were questions, time for the meeting to be closed. And so then we would go to the different entities, the Forest Service. It was very frustrating about the number of overlapping government entities that you couldn't communicate with.
And to that point, I think that's a good point. To that point, we would assume and hope that just as transportation issues are now coordinated through the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, the PPRTA, having this sort of drainage authority would cause both a greater cooperation among the various governments for controlling stormwater and a greater ease of access to the information and to decision makers for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anything else?
Please disagree with what I just said if it didn't represent what your thinking is.
Anything else? Bob? Or Bob? Wrong brother here. I'm gonna get thrown out of here. Dr. Null.
I just would tell you, since you're close to closing, a recent experience of mine when I took a grandchild and we crossed south of town this great big dry river. And she said to me, "Where is Sand Creek?" The impact of that hit me maybe for the first time. Here is this huge riverbed, all created by storm drains. It's time this community woke up and said, we've got a leadership responsibility. I'm sorry, but I just feel strongly about it.
I appreciate that very much.
Tyler, final comment?
Yes, as one of my responsibilities within the region and on other boards of service to complicate things and cause problems. In that light, one thought that I had as the conversation progressed is tying in some funding through this same effort dealing with fire mitigation. And one of the thoughts there is partially voter sentiment, but also logistically to have a regional funding source to then leverage other dollars. And I clearly recognize how complicating that is, and how, outside of that, the flooding and stormwater issues are. But I think there is a nexus there that could both help this move forward, but also broaden the voter sentiment and really push it over the top. So I was going to write you this note, but I figured I'd just say it out loud as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I think your point you're making is absolutely correct. There is a big nexus there. I think it's really up to the authority to determine whether that nexus makes sense for funding or not. But it's certainly a part of the conversation we can have as we move forward with the creation of the ballot language. So, yeah, thanks for making that.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
I appreciate your time, and sorry to have taken so much of it, but I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Well, there's always the presentation, and then there's the questions we come up with after that you're really not responsible.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, I appreciate that.
Moving to item 6A, AAA funding allocations. Kind of no matter how you say that, AAA, you think of somebody different, and you start saying the A's. Guy Dutra-Sevilla. Let me try that, Guy. I'm going to get this. Guy Dutra-Silvera? Is that close enough that you know who I'm talking about?
No. Let me answer your question. It's Guy Dutra-Silvera. Actually, what you have in your memo is a RAC recommendation, so we were hoping that Mr. Gamble would present that to you this morning, and I'll be here to back him up.
Bill, I think you've just seen how delegation works.
Well, I did present the recommendation, and I said we would be asking you for your approval earlier in my presentation. So if you'll, again, go back to the handouts that were not in your package but given to you earlier this morning. There are 2 pages, one that shows how the actual allocations were made, and the second page shows you exactly where the funding comes from. Again, as I mentioned, the Technical Review Committee, the RAC, met with the staff of the AAA, and we both concurred that this was the appropriate allocation based on the RFPs that our various providers submitted. Everybody didn't get all of what they wanted, of course. It's never enough to do that, but we did satisfy all providers with requests that they submitted. So we would ask you to approve these recommendations for the coming 2014-15 fiscal year.
Commissioner Steen?
I can appreciate the great amount of work goes into putting together numbers like this, Bob, but there's, if you go to the top line on the back page, PPACG AAA Administration,
yes,
it's the only one line of the many there that are resourced above 100% of the request. $297,000 plus a few dollars additional, but funded at 307 out of the 297 requested, funded at 103% of request. If you maybe could talk about why we're recommending funding at greater than 100% of the request.
I'll let the AAA director.
The RAC made me do it. So, as you probably all remember, we got an increase in state funds this year. Both our federal and state funds automatically come with a 10% cut off the top for admin. As it turns out, we didn't need all that money this year, and I was able to reallocate some of it for services. But some of the money that we've been using in coordination can be paid for either through administrative sources or through Part B in state funds. And you will notice that the coordination line went down and the administration line went up about the same, and that's where it is.
Mayor Snyder.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. See, I don't think we have anybody from Park County here, so in the spirit of Commissioner DeWallaby, I'd like to comment that it looks like there's about $60,000 in requests from Park County, and they're getting 10. and I'm just curious if that's been vetted up there. I know you said you're going to have a meeting up there at Fairplay soon.
Yes.
But are they on board with this? Because they generally have issues when they feel like they're not getting a fair share of funding.
Yeah, which one was?
And I may be missing something here. I just added up all the Park County requests.
No, we haven't met with them yet, but some of the, I'd have to look at the individual requests to answer your questions specifically, but some of their requests were not justified based on the RFP they submitted. Some of their mileage requests were more than 100% more than what you'd expect. So that's some of it. We have additional.
Actually, we have the director of the Park County Senior Coalition here, if you would like to hear her comments.
Please, come forward. I assumed that was you we were talking about when you stood up.
Thank you. I, too, had expected to see Dwala be here today. I was going to catch a ride with him originally. But as far as Park County...
What's your name, please?
My name is Bobby Gore, and I'm with Park County Senior Coalition, and we are the only provider in Park County. So we do notice when we have increases in a single program, it can affect all of our programs. The administrative costs currently are distributed across the programs, and so this year, the recommendation that we received at the Pikes Peak RAC committee, I believe is the same one that you're looking at. And for that, we had received the same funding as we received last year, with an exception in the meals program. And for meals, we did receive additional funding. The biggest concern that I would have with the funding, we're not sure about how some of it is going to play out, because in the grant process, we understood that there would be questions, an opportunity to answer questions if our grant application wasn't complete. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. But the biggest issue for us is that the going forward numbers are based on past history. And we are trying to grow because the need is growing. And without any other supports, other agencies doing these same services, a lack of an increase in Park County means that we'll really be providing less service next year. The costs keep going up, and we don't have a lot. The county itself, we do have some services that are being provided through human services that help overlap, but we are the only transportation program in Park County, so we don't have the ability to collaborate. The food program, there are food banks and other services that help supplement that. But in general, if the funding holds steady year after year, it certainly gives us a good base and a consistency that allows us to go get the foundation grants to help supplement that. But it also means that the portion that is being funded through this stream is going to provide less service than it has in prior years just because of inflation. The overall numbers, though, do represent the same funding as past years with addition in the meal program.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you. Councilmember Miller.
So just to sum up, the requests were based on your projections going forward, where the award is based on historical.
Right. The projections going forward, the only way that we foresee being able to provide more service with the resources that we have available is going to be developing our volunteer base, but we still need to have support for that. Currently, we have 2 office people that are providing all of our services for all of the county. And so in order to support volunteer staff, we would expect that we may need an additional person part-time in order to just manage that piece. We do expect that the transportation requests are going to increase. We've had an increase this last year for medical requests, but the shortage that we have some very dedicated volunteers. Some of them are taking 3 trips a week that may be an all-day trip. But we still need more volunteers in order to serve requests that we're getting.
Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
Just a comment.
Please.
Sorry. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at, of course, we want this to be equitable throughout our entire service region. I'm seeing where a lot of our more local entities, and they're all very worthy, are getting fully funded, in some cases even additional funding than over what they requested. So it concerned me when I saw only one of the 6 requested categories in Park County being funded. But I guess what I want to hear from you is, are you able to live with that, or do you?
In Park County, we have learned to make do. If we have to, we can. We would prefer to see more funding in transportation specifically. We are not funded through any of the other resources that are coming through Pikes Peak for transportation. And again, we are the only provider. It does count against us that we serve a smaller population and we travel great distances. When you look at just the bottom line, that does not look good. But the other piece for us is that sometimes here in El Paso County, you may be using more than one provider to get a person somewhere. It doesn't show the same way it does in Park County. When I'm taking someone 2 hours to a medical appointment, that is not cost effective, but it needs to be done. And here, it may cost you less for one provider, but that person may have used 2 different providers, and in total, it may come out the same per client.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With that, do we have a motion?
Mr. I would move to approve with the following change, and that is to move, to reduce the, and maybe I should ask for comment after we make the motion, but to reduce the PPACG AAA administration figure by $10,427, and to increase the Park County Senior Coalition transportation budget by that same amount.
We have a motion and a second. I would like to hear from, not sure who, let's start with Guy. By moving that additional money into Park County, does that fund one of their additional requests, or does that fund one of their requests more fully? How would that be utilized?
I believe we could work with them on exactly where that would go. Based on what Bobby just expressed, I would think it would go into the transportation program.
Okay.
I will say that there's a technical problem with doing that. The administrative funds are a separate pot of money, and at this point, I cannot transfer those. So that would be a challenge. I'm not sure exactly how we would meet that. Also, I'd like to. Bill was not part of the technical review committee, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the discussion at the technical review committee level. There was a discussion about funding per capita, and also about the effectiveness of the funds. So on a per capita basis, Park County is funded very well. Can they use more funds? Absolutely. Is there a need? Absolutely. Is there also a need in El Paso and Teller counties? Absolutely. So, the Technical Review Committee and subsequently the RAC balance those needs based on historical data and also the proposals from all the providers and came up with the allocations that you have before you.
I'm going to make a comment here. I wasn't on the review committee, nor am I volunteering to be. But I do have sympathy for those providers that have a higher cost to deliver their services. If we funnel our money to where we get the biggest bang for the buck, we'll be funneling our money to the provider whose services are the closest to the person who needs them. And that doesn't really solve the problem. I know down on the south end of the county I have a pretty high density of seniors, but most of their services are not on the south end of the county, so we're taking our seniors further to meet to their doctors and other appointments than perhaps we would if they lived in downtown Colorado Springs. And that problem is just compounded as you get to the more rural areas. So I don't know how you I don't know how you balance all of those in there, but there has to be a weighting of some sort, and maybe it's, something a little more than one of those, but.
Yes. Well, let me comment on this. If you look at the Teller County Senior Coalition transportation line, you'll see that the RAC is proposing, and staff are proposing, funding them at the same level as last year, too. If we look at our transportation providers, their unit costs run, and I'm doing this from memory, so please forgive me if it's not 100%, from $5 per ride, cost to us, from Fountain Valley Senior Center, a bit of a artificially low cost because of the way they report their RTA funds as in kind because they come through the county, to $16 with Silver Key. Park County proposed $40, and given the geography there, that was a figure that was more or less accepted by the RAC. Teller County proposed a per ride of $60 per ride, which the Regional Advisory Council found to be excessive. So with the idea of encouraging and helping, actually bringing technical assistance into Teller County Senior Coalition to help them bring that per ride cost down, either by coordinating with other agencies or other methods, it was felt like funding them at the last year's level when they've been charging right around $57 a ride was equitable. In Park County, they asked for an increase, not so much in their per ride costs, but they asked for an increase in their RFP based on an increased number of projected rides. When we looked at their historical data, we felt like their projections may have been overly aggressive. So that's the reason that they kept that funding at the same level. But to your point, Commissioner, there's really no apples and oranges in this business. I mean, no apples to apples. Every provider is different, every region is different, every service is different. So there's a lot of this. And, the Technical Review Committee and the Regional Advisory Committee wrestle with it valiantly, and I appreciate that.
Mayor Snyder, did you have additional comments?
Well, no, I found my answer. So you need, this budget year will begin July 1?
Yes, sir.
So today's our day to make this decision. Because I was hoping maybe for a little time for you to reach back out with Park County and see what exactly their needs were and maybe a way we could accommodate that. But I don't think we have that option. So, why are administrative dollars in a separate pot of money?
And a follow-on, didn't you say earlier that you didn't use all of your administrative dollars, so you reallocated those?
Yeah, it doesn't seem consistent, does it? So the answer to that question is the State Unit on Aging gave us our allocation figures, I'm going to say, maybe 6 weeks ago, and they said, we want your budget in our system in 2 weeks. At that time, neither the Technical Review Committee nor the RAC had met. We are able to amend that budget, but what we are not able to do is change the amount we transfer from pot to pot. So we took a stab at what we would need to, what we could afford to administer, to transfer out of the administrative pot to go to services, and that's kind of a done deal.
Okay. Commissioner Steen.
Well, maybe just a follow-up. I did talk with the director of Teller Senior Coalition and recognizing that and she was quite happy on recognizing the conversation and very supportive. So Barb Berger was very appreciative of the level of engagement on the Teller request. So that's why I don't make a comment for asking for an increase in Teller budgets, but recognizing that Park may not have been fully engaged, that's why I made the recommendation. So I understand there's some complications in moving different colors of money between funds. I'm wondering if it's possible to work through any of that
I'd have to take it from someplace else,
Sure.
frankly.
Okay.
If you would like a suggestion, let me hang on a minute.
I'm wondering if perhaps we could approve something here today so they can move on down the road, but Guy did say he can come back with an amended budget. I wonder if that would be a better way to handle this than trying to solve it on the fly.
We do contract based on the figures that the board approves. Usually in the fall, we have some carryover monies that can be allocated, and perhaps at that time, we could make a special effort to take care of any specific needs in Park County or elsewhere that there may be.
To Mr. Chair, I'd maybe amend my motion if the seconder is okay with it, is to approve the budget as proposed with the contingent that we look for year-end funds for increase to the Park County budget to some degree. I'm not sure what that looks like, but if that's favorable to the seconder.
Okay. Chair will accept that motion. Any other? Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not clear on the process by which you were able to move the money previously, but now it's a done deal and you can't do it anymore. Can we go back to the process that allowed you to do it before, or what? When you say it's a done deal with whom? Like, what is the process that allowed you to do it before, and why can't that process be re-invoked?
The process is part of the funding and budgeting process that the State Unit on Aging does with the AAAs. They had a window during which we can do that, and the reason that window doesn't open again is because they have to make the transfers between different funding sources with the federal government, and they have a window in which to do that.
Okay, so they don't have, so that's a once-a-year window?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions? Call the roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And I do recall this being often getting serious discussion before, so Bill, you can report back to your committees that we do take this seriously.
We know you do.
Thank you. We have been joined by our Transportation Commissioner, Les Gruen. Mr. Gruen, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Been here for a while, and I don't look always to that corner. Mayor Snyder sometimes just has to,
I try to get small, but it's hard.
I try to hide.
Item 6B, TIP Amendment Number 18.
Good morning, Craig Casper, Transportation Director. TIP Amendment 18 is a request by the City of Colorado Springs to add $40,000 in federal money and $10,000 in what I believe is PPACG money to an existing $140,000 project to study the relocation of the downtown transit center. The downtown transit facility is widely acknowledged as inadequate in most, if not all, ways, and this is, I believe, the third time this has been studied in the 10 years I've been here. What the difficulty is finding a location and a facility type that meets the needs and desires of transit and meets the needs and desires of the stakeholders. The situation is, I guess, coming to a head again, and there's, with some other things going on in the downtown area, hopefully an opportunity to improve the situation for transit. TAC, staff, and CAC all recommend approval of this item. Any questions?
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Let me go to Councilmember Miller first.
I just want to have a comment. I do concur, and this is a need, but you talked about 3 studies. And the bottom line is every time there's a study, the recommendation is to spend millions of dollars that we don't have. And so, this is a miserably it's not a good facility. But the truth is this facility handled a much more robust schedule of the transit system than what it currently does now. And, I just feel like, and this is the same thing I said with in the city council discussion about the local match for it. I'm sure that the recommendation that would come out of this study would be a far better option. But my concern is why spend the money on the study when we're really not going to find the money. And frankly, if we found the money, I'd rather add to the route system than add to the station. Mr. Gruen's laughing at my comment, but I'm not really sure. So I don't, I expect that the study's going to make some recommendations that we can't afford to implement. And so my question is, study after study after study, why are we spending the money on the study if we don't have the will or the money to follow the recommendations of the study?
Mayor Snyder.
Last time I checked, there's a pretty healthy reserve in the transit budget with Colorado Springs. So I was assuming that money was being available for whatever. In my personal opinion, I'd rather use this money as a down payment on Giuseppe's Depot, which I believe is available, and just get the thing going. But I understand there's greater forces at play. But
Craig Blewett, do you have some input to those comments?
Sure. Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs. We had some of the same dialogue at the City Council meeting. City Council ultimately approved the matching funds on a 6-3 vote. I think one of the things that the study will accomplish, it will give us options for developing an improved downtown transit station, and it will give us prices, and so we'll know what the costs are, and it will also put us in a position where we then become eligible for grants to help us, to assist us in paying for the new station. So without that study in place, without those necessary steps in place, we really aren't in a good position to apply for grants as well. So it improves options for us. Obviously, with the funding situation we have with transit, there will be challenges in funding that, but I think the more information we have puts us in a better position to seek alternative funds.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Do we have a motion? Well, let me make a few comments here. Then I have been around long enough to have seen two of those studies. I guess this would be the third, and I shared Councilmember Miller's. Why do we need another study when we're not acting on what's been studied? I do also understand Craig's comments to be true. If you're going to apply for grants and try to get funding elsewhere, you have to go through step A before you get to B, and this would be step A. So that being said, the chair would look for a motion to approve.
point of clarification.
Yes.
When a turtle pulls its head in the shell, does it make a noise? I'll move for approval of Amendment 18.
Do we have a second? Chair will second. At least we'll have an action taken, of which I was beginning to be concerned about that. Mr. Blewett, further comments?
Just one. We already have $140,000 designated for this study. This action today would put the final $50,000 in place for the $190,000 total. We will go forward with the study regardless with our existing budget. It may be a more limited study, which might hinder its outcome.
Thank you. Further comments? Call the roll. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Hey.
We'll go with a hand count. All those in favor, please raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1, 2. Motion carries 7-2 vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
6C would be tip amendment number 19.
Good morning. Again, this is a request by CDOT to finalize the Cimarron, full funding of the $95 million Cimarron interchange. Attachment 2 shows the breakdown of the sources that were proposed several months ago. They have not changed, with the exception that the 2014 to 2017 bridge funds have been reduced by about $1.5 million to bring the total funding pot down to the $95 million that is the actual cost. The key issue on this item, and both CAC and TAC's recommendation was conditional on it, was receipt of a letter from El Paso County returning funds from several of their projects that aren't moving forward. And that would provide the $2 million in Metro funds that are identified in Attachment 2. The application that was submitted in April of 2013 also identified the $2 million as coming from El Paso County projects. PPACG has received a letter from El Paso County that was rescinded. It was received in January, returning the funds to those projects, but identifying that they have a need on the Mark Scheffel project north to do the design of the project. And so that their desire in January was to cancel those two projects, close those out, and then move the money to do the design for Mark Scheffel north. Like I said, CAC and TAC's recommendation was contingent on receipt of a letter from El Paso County. PPACG staff recommends approval as shown.
Thank you. And help me here. When a member returns funds, they basically lose control of those funds?
Correct.
I thought we'd had that discussion before.
Yeah, funds are given to projects, not to entities, and so if those projects aren't going forward, they should go back to the pool for redistribution by the board.
And we have seen deference given to that member's request, but technically speaking, the money is returned to the pool and is reallocated by this board.
Correct.
Okay. Any discussion on Cimarron? Transportation Commissioner or Mr. Rona from CDOT?
Understand, Mr. Chairman, that $95 million is real money. So I see Dave in the audience, and we're moving towards getting this thing done.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is the final piece.
Can we get that in writing?
This is it.
This is it, all right.
I would like to ask, what happens if this does come in under budget? What?
CDOT will take the money. We'll take the additional. That's what we're doing, is we're sweeping that money back. So that's one of the changes. That's what cash management is doing at CDOT now, is rather than money just going out and not being accountable, we're accounting for every dollar and every penny now because there's so little of it. So if this comes under budget, that excess will be going back to headquarters for reallocation to other projects.
Mayor Snyder?
Commissioner, I'm not sure if you meant accountability. It seems more like the money rather languishes in these accounts for sometimes year over year.
Both.
Okay.
Both of those issues, I think, are issues that the commission has been very concerned about, and that's what cash management and RAMP are trying to address.
And if I may, I think we have it coming up, but do we have a timetable on when the new allocation procedures for these swept funds will be announced and handed down to the MPOs? And
yes and no. I mean, the whole process has been defined and is being implemented right now. So in terms of, we can talk about this next 2014 plan and how all that works, but there's not the sort of predictability that everyone would like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Rob, did you have?
Yeah, I think to maybe help the last $2 million of the $95 million, as you've heard, occasionally we'll come back after we talk with CDOT, local governments. We'll do a reconciliation of these STP Metro money, and this is the same kind of thing. We've been doing it about every 3 or 4 months. And so if there is new available money, we bring it back to the committees and the board to say, look, we've got another $1.5 million of STP Metro money. What's the recommendation from the local governments? And then on up to this board to say, we have some projects that are
waiting in the tip, remember the tip is 6 years, some of the reallocations are negative, where we have to delay projects in those outer years. And then the converse, always equally true. We sometimes get more money, and then we take care of cost overruns for some of these projects and backfill some of the projects. But as we've done last time in the letter on the table, the last time El Paso County was asked, there's some projects that you aren't going forward using these STP Metro money. One of the projects is funding by the PPRTA. So they don't need this Metro money and federal money. They're going to get it funded of a round two of another source. And so the reconciliation and the TIP amendments always keep coming. We're headed to number 20 that the TAC is getting next. And so I think that may help in the discussion for the last $2 million. There are other needs. Obviously, El Paso County has needs, City of Colorado Springs. The rest of you have needs that could use this money. The TIP, remember, is $100 million a year for 6 years. Balancing the $2 million a year sometimes seems the hard part. But remember, as Commissioner Gruen said, we got the $93 million, I won't say in the bank, but pretty much nailed down through the commission. And so this last $2 million is hard to get sometimes, but the board's been talking about it since last April. But we want to make sure everyone is square with it so it moves forward. And I can't promise reconciled new money, but we always look for those projects that come in under. And if CDOT comes in under budget, as we're funding the $93 million, as Commissioner Gruen said, they're coming for other project savings. So that's part of that overall reconciliation. And this being a huge project, maybe there's other reconciliation. We just don't know exactly. So I'll offer that as part of the discussion.
Thank you. And I do expect this to pass. I can't imagine that we're going to say no to Cimarron over splitting hairs here, but if our transportation commissioner could take back to his board, which, like this board, will have changed faces significantly by the time this project is completed, that these were funds that were allocated to Region 2 and Pikes Peak area in particular. It would sure be nice to, if this project were to come in under budget, to not see those go to another part of the state, because we do still have needs here.
I'll do what I can. I think it's incumbent upon us, Mr. Chair, and other board members, that we have worthy projects in the queue so that whether it's me or my successor can say whether it's available money from any savings on this project or other available money, that we want these projects funded. The key is having good projects that have statewide merit and significance. And that really goes to the next part of the discussion. In limited resources, we have to prove ourselves in this region, and to the extent that we can, I think we'll show very well.
Thank you. Councilmember Miller?
Well, I regret those funds, and we're all being optimists that it's going to come in under budget here. So this whole discussion is probably, I regret seeing those swept. We see the same thing happening in the PPRTA. You know, we have a list of vetted projects vetted by the voters, and you know the board had made the decision. Let's not let those funds in the accounts languish, trying to sort of pigeonhole the funds for as much as we'd like to do that. We do have a vetted list of projects, and I guess you have faith in the process that the prioritization of the board and the membership hopefully will be able to make that point and have those funds go where they should be going to get the projects done.
Thank you. Trustee Stevens?
We spend a lot of time on prioritization of projects, and I think this conversation is evolving into a discussion of prioritization of funding. And I think with that, my simplistic thought is that funding should fill in the bucket of the project need based upon size of the funding entity, such that federal government's money comes in first, and that's fully expended. State government is then next, and then local or regional government is then, following that, such that the last dollars in are the hardest found and the most scarce, not the other way around. So that, if we, and I fully agree with Councilman Miller that I think we're optimistic to be having this conversation, but I'm trying to twist this into a policy conversation, that should this come under budget $2 million, and we've worked our tails off to find $2 million, essentially we're sending that $2 million of our local dollars to some other area of the state, which clearly has need, but that shouldn't, this is new territory for the funding of transportation projects in the most recent years, that we're expending so much local dollars towards these statewide priorities, and we understand that. But I think it's going one step further to then say that we are the first dollars in locally, rather than we should be the last dollars in to finalize the project. So I think our $2 million should be the last dollars in, and any needs above that $93 million should be added to what the need is at the final reconciliation.
Thank you. And I've been referring to you as Trustee Stevens when I didn't just say Tyler, and actually you're Mayor Pro Tem, if I'm correct. So
all the names and many more apply.
Commissioner Gruen.
Conceptually, I don't disagree with Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, but I'd just point out that of this $95 million project, the local contribution is $6 million, which of all the state projects, RAM projects, this is significantly lower than the minimum for all state RAM projects. So remember, the initial contribution was $6 million on 30. We were able to get that bumped up to 95. So let's just put this into perspective on what's the local contribution and what the state contribution is. Significantly lower than any other project of this nature in the state.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
This will be done by Friday.
Let's take about a 5-minute break here. I'd like to keep it as short as possible, and we'll get these information items knocked out.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to sit down.
Well, Noel, now you see how much authority I have.
This is how it usually goes.
Call the meeting back to order.
Assumptions and error.
Item 7A, PPACG Board Policy Clarification regarding the expired MOU. Rob, do you want to tee that one off? And
I will tee it up, tee it off, and send it right back to the board.
I was hoping you would knock it out of the park.
I need to open the door and get out the side. Last month, you continued this item for 30 days. In essence, you have the same packet, except two new things I'll talk about in a sec. Same package you got from last month. Obviously, the MOU has expired almost a year ago. It now is a year ago. The board wanted to talk about what's next. So the two new things you've got in your packet are, one, a draft letter from this board to the head of CDOT, Executive Director Don Hunt, to really say, let's get the process started, and we're ready to meet and start talking about the dollars that are going to come to this region for your planning, your long-range plan, which you're going to hear a lot about in the next half hour or less, and what's reasonably expected. And so that's part of the item 7C later on. But to kick that process off, it's really up to the board of what you want to do, because there is no MOU. It's now what process would you like to engage in with the state to determine if there's a discussion to be had on reasonable expectation for funding in this region, so we can allocate and get projects out the door, as we just talked about. Cimarron, it took 20 funding categories to get Cimarron's $95 million. No easy task, and we've been at it for probably a decade, but in earnest for the last couple of years. So this item is really for the board's direction. The most simple thing is send the letter to CDOT and take it from there, or whatever the board would like to do from here forward.
I'm I'm hoping you had a chance to read the letter. The letter does not ask for a written agreement. It says we need to get together and talk because we're working on our long-range plan, and so we have to have some idea what to expect. But I'm certainly open to suggestions for edits. Commissioner Steen?
Maybe just to help clarify, Rob, you could explain why, short of an MOU, why some predictability about your funding is necessary for transportation planning.
Sure.
Maybe for clarification of the board.
Yep. Good question. I think that, as the chairman said, we're in the midst of the long-range plan. You're going to prioritize 200 projects. Then you're going to do the hard part. You're going to apply the 20-ish funding categories to those projects, most restrictive first and on down to the least restrictive. That's where the board has the hard part to say what projects are in the next 26-year plan and who are out. That leads to something more real in our TIP, which is 6 years. Of those projects you're funding and the money available over 6 years, and then in each annual budget, the state budget, obviously the federal budget, and your local budgets. It takes years for your local budgets to put 20% of a $10 million project aside, depending on the project. So we look at the 26-year horizon, 6-year horizon, then into your annual budgets. But you need to know, at a minimum, we think, over that 6 years, what's the reasonable expectation of funding? And again, all those funding categories, federal, state, local, PPRTA, road and bridge, CIP, whatever category you have locally, we want to capture all those projects and the funding for those projects so that we have a comprehensive plan, and I'll call it the TIP, that's 6 years. Everyone knows, public, funders, whoever, the regional priorities are the following. I'm making up a number, 20 projects worth $600 million. And all the funding sources are line item detailed, and so you know, the public knows, the funding source folks know, here's how much money we're going to do. And then the other catch is usually when you add federal money, that adds a dimension of clearance that is multi-year. Clearing under federal law requires a lot of documentation. So we have all those for our major state corridors. Your local government corridors are mostly cleared as well. And so once you have that comprehensive understanding of all the funding sources and the projects, then we really nail down, this board does, what are those projects, how do you cobble together the money, and how do you get I-25 widening, how do you get Cimarron, how do you get Fillmore, how do you get Powers, Highway 24, everything, how do you get it done? 8th Street, there's a suggestion. That's not a state highway just yet. And so that's the reason we're really looking for an understanding by the board, by your committees, and certainly your staff, to say when we start picking projects, we know the amount of money, and we can plug it in and give you a funded list at the end of the day.
Thank you. Commissioner Gruen?
It sure would be nice if it was that easy. It's not. The Transportation Commission, which budgets transportation funds on an annual basis, doesn't know on an annual basis what money is available. So we crave this same sort of predictability that Rob is craving at the PPACG level. It's nice to have, but we don't have it, so there's a great reluctance to provide the sort of predictability that we don't have to others, because we just don't have that certainty. And that sort of has been behind what these MOU issues have been about for all of these years. It's not a matter of not allocating money that there's plenty of. If there was plenty of money, we wouldn't be having these problems. With respect to sending a letter, I want to encourage this board to do whatever they feel comfortable doing. Now, having said that, I want to at least share my recollection of what's happened since that MOU expired. There had been recommendations before the MOU expired for PPACG staff and CDOT staff to have these conversations on what to do if there could be a new MOU that was entered into, or to create some sort of understanding relative to this predictability. And this, again, was before the MOU expired a year ago. Once the MOU expired last June, it was my recollection that this board directed PPACG staff to have those conversations with CDOT, and CDOT staff was very open to having those conversations. I don't think those conversations took place over the past year. So until the last month or the last 45 days, when there were some events that took place that forced some of those conversations to finally take place. So the final thing that I would say, and it goes back to the conversation we had on the last item, I think this region is best served by having projects queued up that make a lot of sense to fund, so that when funds are available, we can fund them, and that, I mean, have them in the plan to the extent they can be in the plan, rather than seek some sort of formulaic number that we should be seeking or we should be demanding from the state on a regular basis, because I think that's just so much tougher to achieve. And I think that by identifying projects that are beneficial to the region and have statewide significance, when funding is available, they'll get funded. So those are my recommendations.
Commissioner, I agree with you that we don't, it would be counterproductive to try to get into some hard and fast number. But how do we do our long-range plan? We have to make some assumptions somewhere, and I would like for them to be realistic assumptions based on what CDOT sees as realistic as well.
I think those sorts of conversations between CDOT staff and PPACG staff on exactly those issues need to be ongoing. I mean, I don't think this should be triggered by the sort of thing we're talking about now, but they need to be maybe institutionalized in some sort of process so that to the extent we can predict, we're able to predict. We're always going to be surprised because of the way that things are budgeted on a federal basis. I think CDOT would welcome the opportunity to provide as much predictability to PPACG and the DRCOG regions and all the other TPRs, as much predictability as possible within the context of our ability to understand what funding we're getting. And I think it makes sense for this region to try to ensure that important projects get funded. But rather, I would focus on that rather than saying we want 5% or 10% or X percent of the funds. But we want these projects funded when funds are available to fund them.
Mayor Snyder?
You should have seen the first draft of this letter. It doesn't have anything about MOU in there or any of that. I think it follows with what you're saying, and I really would like to hear if you think this would be counterproductive to send this letter up. Word on the street, where I get all my good information, is that that DRCOG has been told that they can pretty much stick with their 2035 funding categories as a guide for moving forward with their long-range planning. And I think in that void, we're just looking for some kind of an indication of how we can continue our long-range planning.
I couldn't tell you what they've been told in terms of planning. I can tell you that there has been discussions between the leadership of DRCOG and the Denver area commissioners where both sides are very clear there's going to be no MOU, nothing approaching an MOU.
I think we finally are off the MOU.
So whether DRCOG staff and CDOT staff have come to that conclusion, I couldn't tell you, Mr. Mayor.
And the letter itself, did you find anything really objectionable or counterproductive?
No, but I think, let me read it again, but I think, again, a general working with the staff of the two organizations to try to figure out how to plan together, of course that makes sense, and it's totally reasonable.
And Commissioner, at the previous meeting, this kind of came about by, we were trying to figure out how to remove MOU from the lexicon here at PPACG, and that this is kind of where we ended up. So we're totally in agreement that there won't be an MOU. Those discussions are not productive, and so we were looking for what may be productive. Councilmember Pico?
Yeah, I was just going to reemphasize the point. There's nothing in this letter that locks down any particular formulas, anything. It just says we need to have a discussion so we understand how to make the planning. And I think that's consistent with what you said. So
I think that's a thoughtful approach.
Commissioner Steen, any?
Well, yeah, I'm just going to suggest, Mr. Chair, that I'm wondering if it would help the conversation if we inserted the words, second line of the letter, cooperatively determine the reasonably anticipated allocation. Does that help the conversation at all, Mr. Gruen, or to insert the words reasonably anticipated allocation at the end of the second line? Is that?
And that is, that language is restated later, so that would make sense to me that we stick with that same.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
I think that'd be okay.
Mr. Rona.
The way the budget's laid out, there's a good number of items where the dollars from the planning totals are very predictable, and those dollars as the MPO, you know you can count on those for most all the categories. And we're really talking about a couple of categories that are somewhat flexible, where there's there's room for variability, and most specifically the region priority program. And typically what happens there is that all of your planning partners in the region, there's a regional allocation or amount that the region receives, and at that point all the two MPOs and the three TPRs get together in discussion with your priority projects, and from that, the STIP is developed to prioritize those projects that everyone is head nodding in agreement on. You try and work collaboratively and get consensus and come up with the important projects and get them on that 6-year list. So we're really talking about that small amount of money as being the, what's up for grabs, if you will. It used to be that the faster safety was distributed as such, but right now there's new criteria tied with that, so that only certain projects will actually qualify, and you have to have a match with staff, division of safety, as well as region being on the same page for particular projects to qualify. So it's not quite as easy, to make those decisions and distribute. It has to, you have to look at all the different projects and the merit to be able to distribute those funds as well. But if you'd like, I would offer up, if the board is agreeable to this, where perhaps someone from Deborah Perkins-Smith's office or herself would come down and basically spell out in informational setting, describe the STIP process and how that the STIP is developed, and how you just want to start regionally and work through with your planning partners to come up with the plan to move forward with on how best to use those regional dollars. I would suggest that rather than sending the letter on up to the executive director and taking the approach that, can I count on this percentage? Can I count on that percentage? Because every year you can't really count on a certain percentage. It's really, like Commissioner Gruen says, based upon the important projects, your priority projects, and it may take, one planning area, one MPO might need all the money that's available one year rather than just a percentage of that money to make a real project happen, for it to move forward, whether that be Pikes Peak or Pueblo or one of our TPRs. So it makes sense to work together collaboratively to develop that plan.
Thank you. Rob?
Sure. Couple of points. Just because we are a large planning agency, we have an acronym, Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO. We're one of the three big ones. TMA is the acronym, Transportation Management Area. We follow very closely the federal law in developing our plan and our TIP. Our TIP goes into the STIP verbatim. Once you decide those projects, the priorities, they go into the state plan, they should be funded. The missing link is how much money does this board have available over that 6-year TIP to allocate to projects using federal money, state money, local money, RTA money, road and bridge. All the money is put into your TIP once you do that. And you do amendments, as I said, almost every month. So following the federal law, the reasonable expectation language in this letter is from the federal law. That in your item 7C, the state has just issued the 26-year forecast by 20 funding categories or so of predictability, what the estimate is in 2014 for all these state, federal funding categories. What the reasonable expectation under the federal law and the process we follow for our plan and our TIP is what's the reasonable expectation of that $30 billion the state has identified in that attachment that comes to Dr. Cog region, Pikes Peak region, and North Front Range. We're the three big TMAs. Have to get that. Your financial plan and your long-range plan is built on that, and your list of projects will come from that, knowing, number one, that source of dollars. But remember, we've asked all the local governments, what are your local dollars? PPRTA is going to be asked this afternoon, how long do you think PPRTA money is going to be around so we can put it in the PPACG plan? We're asking the same thing for the cities and counties. What's your transportation dollars? What are the transit dollars over the next 26 years? So we then know PPACG has, here's the guess, $3 billion that this board can allocate to projects that you prioritize with the money that's reasonably expected. And remember, we do the plan every 4 years normally, but we're on a 2-year cycle. And so the discussions we have with CDOT are literally monthly. Commissioner Gruen, you don't attend some of these meetings, but we meet with Region 2, El Paso County, City of Colorado Springs monthly to go over projects and funding. We go to the STAC. We have board members that go to the STAC and hear about the funding monthly. There's a statewide MPO meeting that's at least every other month. All the MPOs get together with CDOT and the head of planning, the head of budget, the head of policy, and have these discussions of what's the total dollars over the next 26 years, and then we drill down into our favorite categories, and I'll just use regional priority program. How is that money allocated? What's the commission policy on that? What's the expectation in the rest of the state? And finally, the request we have of Region 2 at our last meeting with Tom and all the other folks, large corridors, once they're cleared environmentally, we request that, like our corridors are cleared environmentally, I-25, 24, Powers Boulevard, because they're cleared environmentally, we're asking CDOT to give us an estimate of funding for the foreseeable future, meaning how long is it going to take to implement those multi-billion-dollar corridors. And the guide we've offered to CDOT is what they've done with I-70 West and more recently I-70 East, where they say I-70 East is a $2 billion project. Here's the money we can expect over the next 20 years to fund that project. So in our monthly discussions, I think CDOT is agreeable to start looking at how much is it going to take to do the rest of I-25, the rest of Powers Boulevard, and Highway 24 West and East, and what are the targeted, what are the anticipated revenue sources for those corridors. So we're just following a process that CDOT is already doing. We would like it applied to our region so that this board can say, okay, we now need $10 billion projects, but really only got 3. So what board will be the question are those pieces of corridors that we want to get done?
Thank you. Commissioner Gruen?
So I've been a commissioner for almost 7 years now. And this is the sort of explanation it's taken me years to try to figure out. Could anyone explain what Rob just said?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Can you explain that, Commissioner or Councilman Miller?
Well, I think what he said made a lot of sense, is that there's a federal expectation of how you develop plans with a certain expectation, and we're seeking out some parallel to that. At least it's not binding, but just to have an idea of where we're going. And I think the whole point of this was, from the beginning, when the initial push was to try to renew the MOU, is to make sure that the region not only has is treated fairly in terms of our contribution to CDOT funding, but that we can have some sort of expectation for planning, so that we can make a plan that will reasonably fall in an anticipated potential budget. There's nothing binding, but it is useful information to have. And, what we keep hearing is, just take what you have and we'll have our prioritized plans in place, but it helps in the effort to prioritize. Can we prioritize a very large project on the very top? Is that a realistic expectation? But not knowing anything about our funding, then we don't know whether it makes more sense to put a smaller project on there, smaller projects. I think you can't just prioritize in a vacuum. You have to have some idea of what it's just like we do in our households. Do I need new carpet, or do I need a new furnace? What can I afford in this year?
That's a great assessment. It took me a long time to try to figure that out. But there's the real and the unreal. This long-term plan is a long-term plan. And to give you an example from my perspective, a commission perspective, in that plan, in that 2035 plan, is Powers Boulevard at a number, I don't know the real number, I was going to say $750 million. Commissioner Steen tells me it's a little bit less than that, but here's a number that, if you look in inflated dollars, is in excess of $1 billion that needs ultimately, even though it's in the 2040 plan, to be funded by a commission that, even though this is a former strategic project, isn't likely to fund that because of current economic realities. So what I've been trying to convey while I'm a commissioner is there needs to be, in my opinion, on the part of local decision makers, a better understanding, which you have, I'm not sure all of your colleagues have, of the distinction between the wish list and the actual budget that can be spent. And that's what I think is so important with this next discussion, is trying to figure out what's doable and what's a wish list. And that's not to say that the consistency between plans and the conformance to federal requirements isn't important. It's very important. But for us to get I-25 and Cimarron built didn't have a whole lot to do with the 2040 plan. It had to do with understanding where funding was available and the timing to get that done. And that's how we're going to benefit in this community. And that's how I think going for the 2040 plan and the various components, we can benefit most.
Councilmember Pico?
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I think there's, as part of we trying to find an understanding of how to make these plans and take a look out there, needs to be the realization down here, or looking out there in the future, it isn't real money until it's real money, So exactly. You're taking a look at some of that, projections out there and say, we're going to target $60 million for Project B over here over the next 5 years. But you don't know that that's actually going to be $60 billion. You really don't know. But what we need to have is some understanding of how to make those estimates and how to figure out what the projections are going to be, how that allocation is going to be made, not locked down, but in some way to put together a coherent plan that makes sense. As Councilman Miller said, you're going to put Project A and suck it all up, when if you put Project B and C in there, they might actually get funded. We need to kind of have some idea of how to do that. That's all.
Tom and his staff, and the people at DTD are going to bend over backwards to work with us on that. And I think a letter requesting that is very much in order. maybe you modify this letter just a little bit to ask for that, but it could go out the way it is. I think it'd be fine. And I think everything that's being recommended makes a whole lot of sense.
So coming back to the fact this is an information item, direction was given at the last meeting. Focusing on the letter, is it ready to go? Should we add Commissioner Steen's suggestion? Just looking for direction here. Councilmember Pico?
I think we should incorporate what he's recommended and come back
Okay.
and do that again.
Yeah, suggestion that what's being recommended to be incorporated is required under federal state law, that we get a resource allocation. Item 7C has an annual allocation. So we work with DTD and we work with policy of CDOT headquarters and the region to say what, in that fiscal year, what's the expectation of regional priority program money? 1 year, and then take it out on all the forecast years that CDOT has already provided to us for the state. We just need it for the region. And so that's coming. It was due in October. It's now our expectation. There's not a lot of CDOT folks in the House.
So if it's required, it shouldn't be a problem to put it in the letter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we're in violent agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if this board's in agreement, so we don't have to wait another 30 days, we'll make those changes and get it out. Dr. Knoll?
I'd like an informational question answered, and maybe can be answered after the meeting. The issue had been raised at times, in my experience, of whether or not changes in administration change priorities no matter what you put in. And so that's a question that's always been in the back of people's minds who've served on this board. And I would be happy to have an answer to that after the meeting, even if possible. But that's always been this hidden kind of when we're really going to get our priorities kind of job. I had a student the other day say, well, how much does it change having a different governor or a different director of the system? And you see people nod because I know how elected officials I was one act to this sort of thing. But I don't expect an answer right now, and I don't know it'd be constructive. But if somebody really knows the answer to that, I won't quote you, but I'd like to know it because I have students ask me that all the time. Do you lose things because new governors come in? And I know of some cases where we actually did years ago, but I don't know if I stood this on.
I'd like to move on here, so Mayor Snyder?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we have direction on that item. 7B, our moving forward congestion management process. Craig?
Good morning still. Let's see if there's PowerPoint. I'll try to make these brief. The congestion management process is one of our required subplans of our long-range plan. It spells out how we are going to address congestion and add capacity to the system. It is also one of the things that FHWA and FTA during our last certification gave us a best practice for. We work hand in glove with the City of Colorado Springs on this process because, quite frankly, they control the signals and intersections where most of our congestion is. In the past, we had two levels of corridors, the strategic corridors like I-25, US 24. We also had in the intra-regional significant corridors like Platte Avenue and some of those. With the MAP 21, we are required to add on the National Highway System, and that's what your attachment in the back of this item is. It shows the National Highway System plus the two levels of corridors, and so we're in the process now of incorporating those corridors and beginning the process to develop the corridor plans. One of the other changes from last time is we are using data from INRIX. Last time we ourselves drove the corridors to gather the travel time data during peak hour, off-peak hour to get the performance of those corridors. This time we are using INRIX data, which they buy data from cell phone, smartphones. When you use an app, you get your position is tracked, and that provides a much higher resolution of data. Here, let's go to the cool one. This is I-25 on February 26th. At 10:45, average travel speed was 66 miles an hour in the southbound. At 10:46 or 10:47, there was a crash. So at 11 o'clock, speeds had slowed down to 38 miles an hour. By 11:15, speeds were down to 13 miles an hour. At noon, speeds were 11 miles an hour. 12:15, 8 miles an hour. 12:30, basically 6 miles an hour. Then they got the crashes cleared. Speeds picked back up to 12 miles an hour by 1:45, 45 miles an hour by 1 o'clock, and back up to free flow speed at 1:45. We have this data now for the system for the roadways you see in this map. It does not incorporate all of our corridors, so we have driven the corridors that it doesn't incorporate. But we have a year's worth of data in 5-minute increments. We have a lot of data, high-resolution data. And so we can look at crashes and see, and what we found is about half of our congestion is actually from crashes or construction. And we're going to use that to incorporate and develop our next plan, working, like I said, hand in glove with the City of Colorado Springs, and then with the TAC also for other corridors that go out. Is regular, just the roadway, we don't have enough capacity intersections, and so half recurring and half non-recurring congestion. So, are there any questions on the CMP? That was very quick, but I'll try to be.
The time segment is 5 minutes. What's the mile segment? Is it a 1 mile segment?
No, it's real position. We've broken it into.
Different number of positions.
Yeah.
GPS.
Yeah, it's GPS. It's high resolution GPS.
Isn't the 55s on? We have the names too.
The free flow speed in more than one location exceeds the actual speed limit by more than 10 miles an hour. Yes, we have found many cases of that.
You're not issuing tickets, right?
Yeah. So. No.
Can we differentiate between cargo traffic and passenger traffic?
We are working on getting freight truck data. It's a little different.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, we're a little overwhelmed with the database right now. So we're trying to differentiate the different types.
Just a technical question. How many terabytes is that?
I honestly don't know. We have the way we chose to do it is we're keeping it at the INRIX location because they started talking about what the requirements we had, and it got out of hand really quick. And also, we are
The power plant needs to come back.
Yeah, we are. This data is available to City of Colorado Springs too, that we may be able to use to help with some of the traffic signal information we have. So,
Very good. Councilmember Miller.
So when you talked about the construction and accidents causing a lot of the congestion, the other 40% that's just inadequate capacity, seems like that would be our best data to be prioritizing in the tip and everything else and talking about the Powers and Airport intersection and the ones that are red just routinely that never get green or very, very rarely. So
that's exactly the approach we're taking. So
that's going to be a great tool for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Looks like you have the next item as well.
Yes.
All projects and financial
And
plan.
this was alluded to a little bit earlier. One of the requirements of our fiscally constrained plan is that we actually know the dollars that go into it. CDOT has developed the overall forecast of state and federal funds available for the 2040 plan. Federal requirements are that we work PPACG as the MPO, Mountain Metro Transit, who I guess isn't here now, and CDOT as the DOT cooperatively develop the regional forecast of funds. And so we need to go from that statewide total to the regional total. In the past, it's taken between 3 and 5 months to do that. We really don't have 3 to 5 months. We need to have actually our list in 3 to 5 months. With that in mind, PPACG took through the committees, asked them, what are some key points that we should have to figure out what is a reasonable amount of funding for our area. And you can see we have 16 bullet points there. Our forecast, you will see 2 different numbers of our forecast. Inflated and deflated, we have to take into account the impact of inflation on construction and operations maintenance costs. So what we do is we create 2 forecasts. Inflated is the actual dollars that will come in that year, estimated. The deflated is the purchasing power of those dollars in the current year to help us when we go back and forth between them. So you'll see 2 forecasts. Also, what those funds do is they develop 2 lists. Table 8.1 was attached, and that is the list of funded projects from our 2035 plan. And then we also have Table 8.2, which is the needed projects that we don't have funds for, that if we had more funds, we would go through some process to move them from the unfunded list to the funded list. And you can see we have multiple pages of those lists, but we thought we'd send this out. This is adopted from the 2035. The 2040 will look very similar to this, ideally. Some of the things that, going back to Commissioner Gruen's, we included Power Central and US 24. In order to get a NEPA document completed, you have to fully fund those projects in your plan. So we had Power Central and US 24 West fully funded in the plan. We know we're not going to realistically fund those entire projects. We're working with CDOT right now to figure out what the sub-projects are on those corridors that we can actually afford to fund by 2040. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Craig. Yep. Moving on to our non-motorized plan update. Emily Lindsay, welcome.
Hi. Almost good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Lindsay with the Transportation Program at PPACG. So I'm going to give you a quick update on our Regional Non-Motorized Transportation System Plan. This project kicked off almost a year ago, and it's a joint effort between PPACG, the City of Colorado Springs, City of Woodland Park, and El Paso County. So far, we have done an extensive network audit, and I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to let this play in the background. We had somebody ride around all over the place. This is on Woodman Road. You can see him in the bike lane. But we've also completed peer city reviews and existing conditions report, and reviewed local design standards. We've identified over 70 regional corridors, which we're in the process of working with stakeholders and technical task forces and community advisory committees to kind of prioritize and make sense of. So far, we've engaged stakeholders through a variety of methods. We have our Walk Bike Connect website. I'm sure you've all seen that. We have over 200 subscribers, and we've had 4 public meetings with over 130 people attending. We have a stakeholder task force and a technical task force that have both met around 3 times over the project period. And now we are, like I said, under a little bit of a deadline to identify 10 corridors that the consultants are going to look at in detail for recommended improvements. So we're doing that this month with stakeholders, and you guys will see that all next month. So keep an eye out for that. And also, just a friendly reminder, Bike to Work Day is on the 25th of this month. And I know a bunch of you guys participated last year, so hopefully we'll see you there again. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Councilmember Miller.
How are those 10 corridors to prioritize? How are those going to be chosen?
Okay, so we have I guess it's 16 criteria that were developed with the project management team and the technical and stakeholder task forces. So it's all quantitative at this point. So it's ranked, and we have all the data points, which you're going to see next month. So how that gets organized, using local planning knowledge and stakeholder opinions and efforts, it's all based right now purely off of data points, which you'll see.
But the data points are created by participants.
Right,
So if a participant are more centered towards, say, central and downtown, then the data is going to be there versus where it's less participation.
No. Okay, so we did have our map online that collected comments that were infrastructure specific. Then these routes are throughout the entire region, and the data points really are what's available through the U.S. Census from some of our travel demand modeling. It's all available everywhere, so we were able to quantify things for even up in Woodland Park and out in the county. So everywhere, it's treated equally from a data perspective. Yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Craig Casper, welcome back for scenario planning.
Yes. And again, I'm trying to be quick. We've talked in the past that we create a score for the projects based on the adopted small area forecast, but we know the small area forecast is wrong. We don't know how much or which direction, so we develop additional scenarios to help us bracket in the future. So we'll look at households real quick. So we've called those 2 scenarios to bracket in accelerated trend and infill. This is the existing 2010 population by density around the region. Our infill scenario, quote-unquote infill, is actually more of holding the city at an existing level, or at the 2010 level of development. It's not really infill developing per se. And the growth you see on the infill is, on the periphery. So this is the infill scenario. Our adopted small area forecasting, darker colors and more. So you can see we're making more aggressive growth out into the unincorporated areas of El Paso County, also in Teller County. And so this is the adopted small area forecast, and this is what this project score will be per se. But then we also have, this is the accelerated trend, which you can see that continues the trend of dropping population within the city and more growth in the periphery. So when we score our projects, you'll see a score, but then a sensitivity of here's what the project score would be if the infill was the adopted, and this is what the score would be if if the accelerated trend was adopted. We're still fine-tuning households with the different scenarios due to some changes in our methodology. We've had to go back in and change how many the forecast you see includes 5 income categories of households and 4 different job categories. So we have this for employment too. But with the employment, it doesn't really change that dramatically. Infill. This is the infill for employment. This is the small area forecast. This is the adopted location of employment, and then this is accelerated trend. So you see more growth in employment out. We break those into subcategories, and we're still balancing that, making sure that we have the right number of each type of employment and where those locations would be. So when you see project scores, like I said, you'll see a score for the small area forecast and then the sensitivity analysis for those categories. Are there any questions on our scenarios? And I forgot in my rush. These were developed with participation from the CAC, the TAC, and the Small Area Task Force. So this isn't like a PPACG. We reached out to different entities and asked what is, I won't say a realistic, but a methodology, a way of looking at these sensitivities. So.
Commissioner Steen.
Real quick, so what year are we looking at for the?
2040.
2040?
Yes.
Okay, and are there points along that way we'll know which model we're heading more towards?
Oh, we check in every 4 years. And that's why if you actually look at it, our adopted small area forecast this time is actually more sprawly than our last plan's sprawl scenario because our trend has been to continue that outward growth. So we adjust our process every 4 years as we do this. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
And you have the safety update as well.
Yes, I do. Let's see, and we have been working since January to geocode the crashes in our region, and crashes are broken into 2 general types: crashes at intersections and crashes along roadways. They're about 50% each, 50-50 each way. These are intersections, and so we've geocoded the crashes to the intersections and then color-coded them. By group, there's 6 different groups. The top 1% of crashes, which are 37 intersections. The next 9%, which are the purple ones. Let's see, slide this over a little bit. So the black is the top 1% of intersections. The purple are the next 9%. This, I don't even know, orangey color is the next 15%. So these 3 colors combined are the top 25. Then this is the next 25, the 25 after that, and there's a gray color somewhere that's the final 25 down here, final 25%. So we look at these intersections. There are 3 ways to then, within looking at intersection crashes, 3 ways of analyzing it by total number, which this is total number of crashes, irrespective of volume. Then you look at total number of crashes compared to volume to see what the rate of crash is, to see are there places where there's an unusually high rate of crash, which tells us some things. And then the third way is what is the weighted, we call it the weighted hazard index, what is the likelihood of getting injured compared to the volume there. And so we'll call that the weighted hazard index. So we do that for the intersections and the roadways. Let's see. Here's the weighted hazard index for roads for the 2 counties. And one of the things that we found interesting is actually there's a stretch in Woodland Park along, I forget the name of the road here. Gunnison Avenue between Central and Park is in our top 1% of weighted hazard index. So for whatever reason, that stretch of road is there's an unusually high likelihood of getting injured for the rate of volume. It may be a pretty low, it may only be 2 or 3 crashes a year, but compared to the volume, that is an unusual. And we do a 5-year analysis to try to take out those those anomalous numbers. So that's one of the interesting things that we found.
Councilmember Sawyer, you want to deal with that?
Yeah, it's all yield. It's all yield signs through there. That's why, and the yield signs are reversed. So yield this way, and then as you're crossing here, the yield is the reverse on the next intersection.
So you yield every other.
I run that road, and I have to know what yield I'm going through. So. And that's probably why. That is interesting.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we noted is the areas outside the urban core, while they don't have the number of crashes that the interior core do, the rate and injury rate in the outer areas is higher than in the urban areas. That's generally a speed and lack of shoulders type deal, which won't come to any surprise at all to the county. So. Also, for doing this analysis, we are using the exact same data and the same formulas as CDOT, so that crash records that we have will be turn-inable to CDOT for the safety funds that was alluded to. The safety methodologies are changing, and we'll be able to really help our local entities out when they request safety funds, because this data is the same data, the same formulas that CDOT uses. Also, El Paso County was #1 in the state in total crashes, fatal crashes, pedestrian crashes, run-off-the-road crashes. We are #1.
Don't call my insurance agent, please.
We finally made it #1 on the list.
Which one?
8th Street?
8th Street is a high. I can
Trying
go
to
back
follow along, but it looked like the 152 crashes.
Yeah, actually, Airport and Academy was #1 at 201 crashes.
Okay.
So it's right, and that's right here, I think. 213 crashes. That's #1. Academy has a lot of the high volume crashes. So that's #1.
Airport and Academy has been fixed.
Well, it's had improvements made, but if you look at the 2012 data and 2013 data, I wouldn't say it was fixed.
I think it's the drivers.
So, are there any questions on safety data?
No question, but a lot of questions. But it's pretty amazing that you can compile that data and has potential to be very useful.
54,000 records, 54,000 crashes that we have. So, and 29 different criteria for those 54,000 records. So we have a really big spreadsheet.
It'll be a chapter in your long-range plan.
Yes, it will.
Mayor McCafferty.
Craig, is all this available on the website?
None of this is available on the website right now.
None of it?
None of it.
Okay.
We're still in the process of compiling it. And for the last plan, we actually put our crash data on our Google Earth site, trying to inform the public. I started getting calls from lawyers every day about things. So the data is available, but I don't think it's something that we're going to want to have. Okay. It'll be a chapter, and there'll be some other stuff. And we're open to anybody requesting data. Schriever Air Force Base just requested all the crash data along State Highway 94. We sent that out to them yesterday. So.
Well, and I'd like to point out that a lot of the problem out east, the biggest problem we've had lately is people just not wearing seatbelts.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the last...
I don't know why people get on a gravel road and think they don't need a seatbelt.
If you look at our infographic, the number of fatalities in 2008 where no seatbelt was used, the good news is, I guess, we're killing off the people who don't wear seatbelts. So eventually we'll
get more lawyer calls. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you very much.
Last information item is statewide transportation, the stack. What do we have?
Agenda's on the table, and Craig or Norm?
Norm, what do we have?
I actually have a voicemail from Jeff Sudemeyer upstairs about he thinks that the bulk of the stack discussion is going to be on how to split the statewide pool money up into regional pools, which isn't clearly identified as any one of these items, but he assured me that will be an extended discussion at STAC. The other things will be our update of things that are ongoing, sort of like you just got, except for the statewide plan, because CDOT's developing their statewide plan right now. Before I forget, the telephone town hall is June 24th. Commissioner Heisey, Chairman Heisey will be our host. Les Gruen will be a host, and then Clerk and Recorder Williams will be the three speakers. But CDOT staff, PPACG staff, I expect some city and county staff will be in the room to answer questions for that telephone town hall.
Just an observation that, STAC has an advisory role to the Transportation Commissioner. If you look down the list of informational vice action items, the predominance is on informational. The trend is to move items off the action into informational items only. So just an indication of the role of the STAC. And it's interesting that the 1055 item is a STAC roles and responsibilities. So we'll now be coached by CDOT as to what our role is.
Yes, stop doing things that you're not supposed to.
And I think some of that goes back to Dr. Knoll's question earlier about do things change when you have a change at the executive level. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any member entity announcements? Anything you'd like to announce for the good of the Commonweal?
Let me just put a pitch in that the work sessions we have on the Fridays prior to the week, I've always found very, very helpful. The attendance has been fairly low, so I really encourage other members of the PPAC to attend those. Very, very interactive and very informative. So if you've got time on a Friday afternoon, and maybe I don't know what the next date is, but I just encourage you to put that on your calendar.
Thank you. Anything else? You have the meeting schedule. We are adjourned. You know, I didn't think we were going to be. It seemed like they waited a little longer. I mean, they just it's only 3 actions. I gave up a long time ago trying to tie the length of the agenda.
That's what I made. So you can zoom in and see the black, purple. Yeah, so those we can drop off. Yes, if you zoom in.
And when you have 6, 8 report items, that's before you get to information.
Scheduled a lot.
It takes a while. Who? Keith King? Yeah, I noted that too.
I know there's some health issues there, but wouldn't that be better served with somebody who could regularly attend?
That's quite Joel.
Is Joel the alternate?
Joel's an alternate.
Okay.
Oh, you only have 2
Testing
names?
names, so.
We have 3. Yeah, Don Knight's usually here.
Yeah.
So there's Alexander.
We have 3 primary, 3 alternates.
Norm,
Dave
I bet we
Street
got something to sign.
and, something Boulevard. Let me drag this. This is looks like South Union Boulevard or something. So, and we can zoom in, and we have that. Here, let's go to another one.
Make a lot of sense.
Yep. So here's roadway segments. And we don't have all of them.
Yeah.
The main ones, so San Miguel, which also is Marion, Galley, and so like it's the same scale, purple or black, purple, dark, and it gets lighter as it goes down.
If I send you
Yep, exactly. I can totally do that. Yeah, totally do that. So.
To answer Dr. Null's question, we get stiff equally.
Yeah.
Both sides.